Welcome to the Edify Studios podcast, discussing the shift of architectural concepts into actual solutions, disrupting the current status quo, and having a blast the whole time. Here are your hosts, Brad Glauser and Brad Walker.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Edify Studios podcast. We got a pretty cool episode today, my man.
To hell with that. We got the best episode today.
That's right.
We got the Godfather of Funk up in here. He's gonna boogie down with us.
That's right. We are going to get a little bit nerdy, a little bit wild, and just going to have a good time today. Today we have got Mick Patterson with us. How are you doing today, Mick?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Good, thanks.
Good to have you here.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah, man. This is a long time coming. Reached out to Mick on I think it was LinkedIn first off. I said, hey, what do you think about this podcast idea? And he's like, yeah, that might be fun, actually. That'll be kind of a cool idea. And then messaged back, and he's like, hey, by the way, we're doing Facade Tectonics. Why don't you come by and check us out at the same time, too? And, man, what a great event that was yesterday.
Yeah. Good news is that he didn't go back and, really study our podcasts or any of the value within them because he has no idea. They are just like low hang. No, it's good. It's going to be an incredible journey. I think we're gonna go the full gamut with it 100%. Checking in, just how have things been for you since the last time these people in the YouTubes or the Spotify's saw or heard you?
For me,
yeah.
Well, welcome. Well, man, it's been a while, so welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Right? No, so check-ins for me, we just do check-in to kind of make sure everything's going okay. I mean, so one of the things that we've been working on as a family at home is just kind of so kids are getting older, so all of a sudden, things are bigger, right? Not like
the kids?
Yeah, like the
That'll
kids.
happen. They do
kids
grow.
Are just bigger. So as a result, they need bigger things
More
to
space.
kind of do stuff with, right? So it's just funny how so much of the stuff you're okay, now it's garage sale time, or do we give this away, or how does this work? Or so we're currently, I've got my 14-year-old boy, actually almost 14, 13-year-old boy. He's doing some work, summer work, moving the dirt or helping. We're building a shed right now, and so okay, these things need to happen today. So as I go to work and be okay, see this mound of dirt in a wheelbarrow and a shovel. This thing has to go to over there.
Oh, that's right. You were showing me the text string.
So the negotiation started, and I texted him back. I said, "Hey, did you start?" And he's like, "I'm going to get a bowl of cereal and I'll be right there." I'm like, "Okay, great. So just tell me when you started, so we can you can be on the clock." And so he texted me I don't know, 5 minutes later. He's like, "I'm good to go." And he's like, and then about 2 hours in, he goes, so takes a picture of it. He's like, "This is what's happening. This is what it looks like." I'm like, "Okay." So are you going to finish it, or what's going to happen? And he goes, well, how much am I getting paid? Right? I'm like, he was just on it left and right.
Mid-work negotiation.
And I said, what if we think about doing X? And he goes, okay, that sounds pretty good. All right, that's good. He goes, X per hour, right? No. You don't understand how this works. I told you the mound has to move. Right?
The whole
entire thing of dirt has to basically be wheelbarrowed over to the other side of the yard, make it happen. And he's saving for one of those VR things, like an Oculus VR thing. And so there's trying to give him some opportunity to kind of earn some money during the summer.
That's awesome.
So, well, anyway, so he's like, yeah, X per hour. And I'm like, I said, probably not that. I said, how about X for the entire thing? That was the whole deal. And then it broke it down in math. He's like, all right, that sounds good. He goes, and then he bumped it $5. He's like, how about $5 more? And then I bumped it $5 down. And then he goes, no, that's fine. X is good. Fine. And then I bumped it another $5 down. And he goes, no, we're fine. We're good.
That's awesome.
So yeah, man, we're just getting in a teenagerhood, getting into the thing, but saving money for VR headsets as a kid, so anyways.
Just playing the general contractor, subcontractor role.
Exactly, right?
Midstream.
Trying to negotiate his way
That's awesome.
down when you already know what the budget is.
Yeah. You know what the floor is. You know what he's willing to take.
So yeah, it's been good. What about you, my man? How have things been?
Man, it's been incredible because the weather has been just a hot mix of incredible and just garbage.
It has been garbage.
Just garbage.
Let's define garbage. We start complaining when it's about 75% humidity and 70 4 degrees.
Yeah, it's just been
Sounds bad, right, Mick?
the mug here. We're not used to it. We're used to
we're not.
moisture in the air, but when it gets warm and moist, it's no bueno. We're cool moist. We're the produce counter at the grocery store. We like to be, chilled slightly and then misted about every 20 minutes just to refresh us. That's our whole strategy. But the less sun sometimes can add to the benefit. We've been doing a tremendous amount of yard stuff.
Yeah.
Big yard stuff. We got boulders delivered and digging new plants and trenching new areas. And so it's been phenomenal for that. And so we've just, as a family, just been like this super work crew.
That's awesome,
just
man.
chain gang style out there, sun up to sunrise on the weekends. And it's been phenomenal. It's just been a really good time for that. And it's been very enjoyed by, most of the family. I don't let the kids complain. So I'm sure they complain on their own time, but not on my time.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
Well,
I wish it worked that way.
Yeah, how was the deck experience? Dinner on the deck. You just got a new deck, so it's more,
Finally, yeah. So it's everything on the deck is phenomenal.
the deck life.
Yeah,
Living the
so
deck life. Man.
we've lived in this house for about 13 years. We had nothing postage size stamp deck that you wouldn't even go out there. It was basically just a way to get on the stairs to go down. And we recently enlarged it after 13 years of living there, and it's phenomenal. It's just having that experience to walk out and just be outside and magical. So I can enjoy it 18, 19 days a year beautifully, because that's when it's not raining.
Yeah, because that's when it's not.
That's what I tell people that aren't from here.
Right.
Because everybody from Seattle needs to know it rains every day, all day. And it's never nice. So don't move here. There's no space.
Even though we want to keep building
Yeah,
construction.
well, you can work here.
Oh,
You just got to fly home at night.
fly home at night. What about you, Mick? How you been, man?
You guys need a break. Come down, see me in Southern California. I got a whole bunch of yard work.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Now I'm motivated.
Now I'm motivated. Well,
Heck yeah.
I don't know.
I got raised beds going in, all kinds of dirt that needs to
Do
be
ya?
moved. My wheelbarrow is ready for a workout. Yeah.
Outstanding.
Hey, maybe we'll send the kids down and they can actually just work it out.
Yeah.
That'd be fine.
So a lot of people,
You've already got them understanding fixed price
Exactly.
deals and
Yeah.
how to negotiate and that kind of thing. Yeah. It's like,
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good time, man.
No,
That's awesome.
A lot of people probably don't understand, but as I understand it, you do have a tremendous amount of yard work because you are quite the avid gardener.
That is, I don't know if I would say it's. I have to classify that because
Sure.
I'm getting avid. I've
Okay.
been a gardener since I was a kid. You
Yeah,
know,
me too.
That was a pretty easy thing to do in Illinois. You just kind of, throw some seeds at that black soil
At
and
that
it
black
grows
Midwest
like,
soil.
I mean, tomatoes like you wouldn't believe.
Really?
You got to work at tomatoes in Southern California.
Yeah.
It's it's a lot of work.
And then we often forget that tomatoes have a flavor.
yeah.
Like it's constant with us because we understand that tomatoes have flavor, so we rarely settle for whatever the store is offering us as
for sure.
as what they're calling a tomato,
Yeah.
which has the look and shape and somewhat smell sometimes of the ripe tomato, but almost never has a flavor.
Yeah.
Like it's just this watered nothing version.
Yeah, we always forget until all of a sudden August comes around and it's garden tomato season here. I know it's like a lot earlier in Southern Cal, but oh my gosh, just like a good bruschetta, garden fresh tomatoes.
Yep.
Oh,
Unbelievable.
nothing like it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I took a 10-year sabbatical from the drawing or from the gardening to go back to school,
Yeah, well,
and
that'll get in the way sometimes.
And I'm done with that now. And I'm back into the garden, and it's
Backing
it's,
into the dirt.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
just producing things. Well, you brought up Illinois, so let's jump in the Wayback Machine and take this journey the other way. So the whole story, everything starts in Illinois, correct?
It does, yeah.
All right, tell us about Illinois.
Well, I grew up south of Chicago. Most of my time was in Kankakee, Illinois. That's where I went to high school. Eventually went to college at University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. So I spent the first 30 years of my life in Illinois. That's a whole different kind of weather to talk about there.
Oh,
The Midwest.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, no, that's
So at that
Like
point, I got a offer I couldn't refuse that moved me to Los Angeles. But you have to understand, growing up in the Midwest, everybody thinks of Los Angeles as the absolute worst place in the world to live.
Sure.
Yeah.
The armpit of the world.
Traditionally,
smoggy,
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So I was not at all keen on going there. But,
Interesting.
you know, I got, like I said, a job offer I couldn't refuse. So
Okay.
that's what brought me out to California.
Yeah, I think in concept, outside looking in, it is about as far away from the Chicago living as you can get in the mental state of, if you see it in TV and movies and any sort of reality, that is 100% opposite of the way that people come up in Chicago, right? So I could see that as a big question mark of what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
L.A. What? Nah.
So how was it to grow up in the Midwest as a kid, man? Lots of, is it an urban area? I mean, or was it a more rural area? What was it? How was it?
It was a smallest town. Kankakee's like 30,000. You know.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
sort of a suburb almost. I mean, now actually it's
Probably is a
it's
suburb of
six-
Chicago.
You know, within 60 miles, it's,
Oh, yeah.
you know, it is effectively a suburb of Chicago. But, you know, not so much when I was a kid. A nice, quiet little town on the river, a lot of industry. You know, it was a good
Sports,
place to grow
baseball,
up.
or anything
yeah,
like that?
of course. Yeah, absolutely.
So Southside meant Chicago, like the Sox or the Cubs or where? I mean,
Yeah, Cubs, man. That's
Cubs.
like, you know,
Cubbies.
Yeah, you know,
That's awesome.
I'm a third generation
Cubs fan.
Cubs fan. My father was an avid Cubs fan. He lived to be 93 years old. Never got to see them win a World Series. Unfortunately, you know, I mean,
Gosh, no
but
way.
you know, absolutely
Just
steadfast.
True blue through and
Yeah,
through.
true blue.
Oh, that's outstanding.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunate that he didn't get to see that, but to be, there's something magical about the fans who are just there to support.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not fair weather fans, not bandwagon fans, the real legitimate, bleeding the same color fans, and that's just it's rare to see.
Yeah.
And so just incredible.
The pastime of baseball, like, is such an American game, and they call it like America's pastime. Or I mean, okay, great, 162 games, you know, or 68 games. Or I'm
Don't look at me.
Trying to remember exactly what it was, but a full season. It's on all the time. Although during the summer, you got spring break. Even if you follow the team avidly, like I know the Cubs actually train near where the Mariners do, down in Peoria, Arizona, and it was it's just so much following every single year as far as when the winter meetings happen and all that stuff. And I love baseball. I grew up.
Yeah,
I mean, my
don't
kids,
look at me. I assume
Yeah.
baseball doesn't have a season because it's just always on.
It's always on.
It's like baseball's just always playing. Like there's not a start and stop in my world. That's crazy. So you're when you're in school, junior high, high school, however it works out for you in Illinois, are you instantly thinking structural glass?
Yeah, right away. It was,
Structural
right out of
glass.
the womb, man. It was yeah.
Glazing structures, commercial facade, curtain wall, stack joints, chicken head. That's where your brain's leaping to at that moment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you know, it was, you know, it's one of those stories, not an uncommon
please.
story where I'm, you know, high school, and you know, at that point where I've got to be thinking about what I'm going to do when I go to college,
Yeah.
and I had I was actually applying for colleges, and I picked up The Fountainhead by
I
Ayn
love
Rand.
that. I love that book. My dad told me that about that. There was a movie made on it.
Yeah.
On Fountainhead.
Yeah.
Yeah, he introduced
Howard
me.
Rourke is the
Howard
main
Rourke.
character
Yeah,
of the architect.
he actually showed me. Oh my gosh, this is where it started.
Yeah.
Like
No.
the Fountainhead is like everything that. So, anyways, go ahead. I want to hear. This is exciting. I love the Fountainhead book. Go ahead.
So you know, I mean, it's a great book. Ayn Rand. I mean, now I understand the politics that are behind that book, and I'm not I'm not in agreement with those politics
No,
at all.
no, it's
and
not
the way
that.
she characterizes society and the especially the cities, like in Atlas Shrugged is another novel,
Right, yeah.
and the cities are very sort of godforsaken,
Gothamish.
yeah, shadowy
yeah,
places
yeah.
where there's evil and corruption, all this kind of thing. And
Sure.
shit, I lived in New York City. New York
Hell's
City
Kitchen.
is a spectacular place to live. I
is,
mean, it's just so vibrant, and she just didn't get it at all. But anyway, the book was, I'm a young kid. The book is compelling.
It's a
by
little
the
bit
time
taboo,
yeah, and it's the individualist, and all that kind of heady stuff for a young kid, and it's it carried me right away. I wanted to be an architect, and
Did you really?
Yeah. So and I was looking at schools in California, Arizona, Colorado, and it just so happened at that time that University of Illinois was the third ranked architecture school in the country. So I said, I got to go to U of I. My parents must have been so thrilled. I'm going to a state school instead of going to California to Stanford or something like that, and it's
U of I was the third architectural school.
Yeah.
Man, what a blessing.
I think, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, I only
Yeah,
lasted a semester, and
Okay.
but by the time, so it's like a complicated story, but
Yeah, please.
I was sort of aimed at engineering. I'd
Okay.
been studying math and science and all that kind of stuff in high school, physics
Sure.
because I was in architecture, I had these electives. I had to take an art class, and
Right.
and I'm in this art class, and it's a real art class. It's not It's not art for architecture students or something like that.
Right.
Or a drawing 101 just because you have to fill a course or something.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
And I'm in there with the kids when you were in high school that had that talent, and the teachers always going to them and having them draw, this illustration
They
for.
can see it and do it, right?
Yeah,
For some reason.
Wasn't
yeah.
even a question. It was
So
just a do.
I'm in a
was-
class with all these kids. I'm so intimidated.
Yeah.
We've got nude models coming in that we have to draw. It was like a
Just blow your mind.
mind-boggling
wow.
experience, and I'm just so inhibited, and I can't. It's terrible, but
Sounds
I got
fantastic.
through it.
Sounds terrific.
By the end of the semester, I loosened up and
Sure.
got into it. And the thing was, I basically never had an art class before. So, I made the decision that this is what I wanted to do. So my second semester in college, I switched to an art major. And my parents are like,
No
what?
No way.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, first of all, that's
That didn't last long either, but
that's a captivating professor. If they're making somebody, you know what I mean? Like that is a shout at how incredible those facilitators must have been in getting somebody who's not been in it at all.
Yes,
and has a path sort of in front of them, and then goes,
yeah, yeah.
that's incredible.
Directly
And
right away.
it's very interesting because a lot of architects that we've talked to and have met along the way started as a way to how do I take this? I love drawing, I love art, I love design, I love these things. How do I make money out of my doodles? Like how do I turn this love of putting a pen to paper and creating something into work? How do I financially monetize that?
Yeah.
And this is kind of a different now you've gone down the architecture, the high level thinking part of it, and you've taken a right turn at the art side of it.
Yeah.
And clearly they're all together in the same wheelhouse. But now you've looked down this road of art, and everybody's obviously very excited for you to take that road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very excited. Yeah.
Very excited.
My
They're
parents are like, what the hell?
They're clearly overwhelmed at this incredibly great decision you've made and
Right.
support you in full.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden I'm I'm out of the house and I have this freedom, So the next semester, I'm starting to discover that there are these these other things like design, graphic design. Yeah. So the next semester I'm majoring in graphic design.
So every semester was just hey, that's awesome. This is great too. Wow.
And then I got into cinematography. That was I got into both photography and cinematography. And my photography class was my professor was Art Sensabaugh, who was a classic sort of Ansel Adams-esque kind of a photographer. He used to do these immaculate prints he had a special camera made. So this is the Midwest.
Wow.
It's flat. You can see forever.
gorgeous.
He made this. He had the special camera made that was like a negative that was like 2 feet wide and maybe 4 to 6 inches high. You know, so
Like a
really,
panorama type of a
like only it wasn't panoramic. It was
was a
an
picture.
old, the kind of view
the
camera.
drape and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he'd do contact prints on this thing. So the prints ended up being that size.
my gosh.
And they're absolutely perfect black and white, super
resolution.
super high resolution, super high. And he was famous, with that, photographic style. He was my professor, So I got exposed to this deep dive into photography, which I've continued to
Have you?
do that, my whole life. What a fantastic tool,
Oh, it is.
skill to have to, carry. It's integral to my day to day.
Absolutely.
I mean,
No, for sure.
but now I have to admit I have a really hard time. My iPhone just keeps getting better and better. I have a really hard time talking myself into lugging around the gear.
I
you're
know.
not
it's
wrong.
It was the same thing with me.
You're
Like,
not wrong. I ended up buying us both better lenses to attach to our iPhone because it was easier to tote around.
Yeah, well, we'll have to talk about that. I mean, I'm interested in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that
love to show you that.
that would be awesome.
So clearly a learner. You're a learner, and you love to just gravitate towards
Learning and educating.
knowledge, right?
Well,
Absolutely.
I wouldn't exactly say that. I was motivated by the discovery, at that
Okay.
point in time. I really, at that time, had not learned the joy of learning yet.
Okay.
My high school experience was, I would characterize it as brutally uninspiring.
Oh yeah, no. We've talked about this a bunch.
Any fun experiences in the brutally uninspiring world of high school?
Oh God, it was just a killer. I remember I was probably a problem student, at least to some extent. And I remember my English professor telling me, or no, it was actually the assistant principal of the high school. One
Right,
time
you
after
got that level, huh?
after I got kicked out of an English class, telling me that I'd never amount to anything.
I love that statement. Oh, love that
powerful.
statement. Yeah.
It's great when your teachers are telling you that.
Yeah, right?
It's a nice message to get. When you're in
Wildly
high school.
motivating.
Yeah.
No, but
Yeah,
it's the same. Like we've shared this several times, and it's high school wasn't built to teach me the way that I needed to learn.
Yeah.
And they don't need to cater to everybody, but for me, I didn't. High school was just what it was for me. It just was 4 years of just doing whatever they said. I love to learn. I crave learning, but that wasn't a format in which I could consume information the way that I wanted to. So after that, I was able to pick and choose the things that I wanted to learn, and I could learn them in the ways that I wanted to. And so it sounds like you were more of a expedition explorer
Yeah.
of education, and you were constantly sort of bewildered by these new things and these new pieces, but it's all tying to art and design, and it's
I
all in
was
the same world.
not really bewildered. I was just super excited about him.
Yeah.
Like the photography thing was just fantastic. And then, I mean, it'll come across in this dialogue. But I've been around a while, and it's like in the cinematography class I took at the University of Illinois. It was the only one that they offered.
Okay.
It was an elective class. There was no school of cinematography.
Was there film study in with it too?
It was
like, kind of
no,
like
no,
oh no, it's
no,
just the how-to.
It was
of
a guy there
cinematography.
that was in the art department. That was he was a cinematographer. He was great.
Wow.
So he was a great teacher, and it was Super 8. Was the
Really?
format that we were using, and video. Was just starting to happen, right?
Okay.
So one of the things that I got to do was, one of the Super 8 films that I put together, I went to the local television station.
Okay.
And they had, it's like brand new video equipment, a little studio that they just started up. And I talked them into letting me use it, and I converted my Super 8 film to video and got to, it was black and white. There was no color video. So
Okay.
it was black and white. but I got to edit and
Splice everything,
fool around with it,
and then do the tape and then bring it
well,
back.
I spliced. I'm splicing the Super 8, but
Right.
the video, then you can cut and edit.
Correct.
In this sort of new kind of pre-digital way.
Interesting, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun. That was fun. So I converted this one film I remember to it was like a 3-minute black and white. I mean, it was
it's good. What is
I
it?
submitted it and it got accepted into a film festival, and it was shown at a film festival. Yeah, it was cool. It was fun.
That's really exciting as a college student. I mean,
so
that's thrilling.
So the thing is, none of this stuff is going towards any kind of credit, right?
So why, Mick, why would it?
I end up 3.5 years into college.
Okay.
And I'm nowhere near a degree, and when I came to that realization,
oh man, that's perfect.
Okay, so this is like, but oh man, this is, I hit freshman University of Illinois in 1967.
Okay.
Oh man, this was a good time to be.
It was a good time to be in college. It was a good time to be in college.
So I'm 67, 68, 69. I'm on campus. I'm getting to the point where I'm supposed to graduate. I'm 3.5 years in. And I go, I'm not ready for this, so I quit.
No way.
I quit.
You're like, I can't graduate? No, it's not going to work.
I'm out.
And headed west.
Went
to San Francisco. It's like half of my friends from high school were already in San Francisco, and this was, the
that was the spot.
That was the spot. That was the big time,
So you went to San Fran in the early 70s, late 60s?
Yep.
Okay.
Summer of Love and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, that's like Janis Joplin and the whole deal. That's where everything kind of got birthed.
It was a really great time to be alive and grow up. Growing up in that. Spectacular.
See, and I think of that time period in California together to be the real epicenter of exciting times.
Yeah.
Because it's just, I picture just riding a motorcycle down the Pacific Coast Highway and just super relaxed, chilled, enjoy it, love it, be part of it.
That was everything from I'm thinking of that Harley film with Dennis
Easy
Hopper.
Rider.
Easy Rider. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Fonda, what's his name?
Peter Fonda.
Peter Fonda. Yeah. That's, just culturally, obviously, I think about some of that stuff.
It just sounds like a great time.
It does. It sounds like a great time to be alive. So what took you to San Fran? What was, you said that you got a job offer heading there. Who did you work for? Or how was
I lived in San Francisco for a couple of years, moved back to Illinois, still trying to figure out what it is I wanted to do. All that previous stuff was exciting. It was a voyage of discovery, right?
Sure.
And you don't automatically know when you graduate from high school. You're 17, 18 years old, whatever you are. When
I think
graduate.
it's just about that staying active and doing and discovering. For me, like Walker talked about it. For me, I didn't necessarily really engage in the learning atmosphere until I was probably mid-20s.
Yeah.
Maybe 23 is where I really kind of my brain switched on. I understood, I don't know.
Well, that's kind of what happened to me. I got to 25. I was working in, I went back to Illinois, and I worked as a carpenter for a while, which was great. But then the winter comes and they lay everybody off.
Yeah.
And I'm driving back, driving back home, and I need a job. And I see this, I'm looking at this strip mall, and there's a thing that says cable TV. And I said, TV, I like that. I want to, maybe I get a job, doing video at this TV thing. So I go there, and it's one of the early cable TV startups. There was no cable TV at this time. So I walk in, and it just so happens that the manager is at the door, and he says, I said, I'm looking for a job. And he says, can you climb telephone poles? And at this point, I was pretty much, anybody asked me, could I do it? I'd say yes.
Sure.
So I said,
absolutely,
sure.
I can.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I got boots in the truck.
So he took me out into the back in the alley and gave me these gaffs, which I'd never even seen before, But, you can pretty much figure out how to get them on and what they do. Yep. So I put them on. I climbed this telephone pole, and I was hired.
No way.
And that was it.
So that was your interview process?
Yeah, that was it.
He said, "See that thing? Go for it."
Yeah.
No way.
So I did that for a couple of years, and it went places, right? I ended up managing, a startup cable TV operation in a small town in southern Wisconsin.
Gotcha.
But I wanted to go back. I at this point I was figuring it out, and I knew it was design.
Right. Okay.
I wasn't sure. I thought it was still architecture. I knew I wanted to get into building. I mean, this is all, at a time period, this is important, right? I mean, this is another phenomenon of this age. It was Buckminster Fuller, our Buckminster Fuller, Bucky Fuller, right?
Yeah,
and this was a time when Bucky Fuller was going around to the universities and like he'd come to the U of I, and he'd be in the main hall of the architecture building, and there'd be a lecture, and we'd all congregate there and sit on the floor, and he'd start talking, and 6 hours later he's still talking.
Gosh, really?
Oh man! And he takes you on, he takes you out into the universe somewhere, just spinning out there, and then brings you back, and connects with this point where you departed, and then he spins off again. I mean, it was just what a phenomenal guy he was.
What a treat to be able to witness it in the way that you were able to. I mean, just unbelievable.
Yeah, actually, I had one of his chapeau hats that I ended up with. Yeah, he was a phenomenal character, but he. So that was a huge influence on me, and it was it was a really unusual time where it was like every red-blooded American kid was out in the backyard building a geodesic dome.
Oh, gotcha.
If you can imagine that, in this age, that's what we were doing. Everybody wanted to do that. So structures, building and structures became some central component of what I wanted to do. So I go back in architecture again. So this is like, I'm 24, 25 years old at this point, and I'm still struggling. It's the architecture program. You're looking at 4 years of reinforced concrete theory, and I'm going, this is just not quite it. And so I had a relationship with the dean.
A bucket of excitement. 4 years of reinforced concrete theory.
Just a nonstop thrill ride.
That's right. That's right. So, I had a relationship with the dean at this point. I mean, because I'd go talk to him with him about this.
Negotiation. I like it.
So, I go and I'm having this conversation with the dean, and he's asking me, what I'm thinking about and what's not working. And, he goes, you should go over to the basement at the Fine Arts Building, and there's these guys, this program down there for industrial design. You should go check that out. And I did. And I went over there, and that was the end of the story, man. I had found my home, and
really,
I discovered the joy of learning, and man, that's the greatest thing. If you can teach young people the joy of learning, oh man, I mean, you don't have to teach them anything else.
I know, you just have to let them absorb.
Let them go,
right?
and
let them go.
They're on their own at that point. And I'm thankful that I learned it, finally at that point. I wish I would have learned it, like 10 years earlier.
Well, everybody thinks that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that for my kids and stuff like okay, we got to make sure we learn and stuff like that. But it's for me, it just didn't turn on. Like I was in a place of like, yes, I was interested in everything. I was learning certain things, or I'd go down a hobby path and I get really involved, like in guitar or something like that, or really involved in theater because that's what I did. But when I came back to school or when I did that stuff, I really didn't really engage from an academic standpoint until really I was that mid-20s area. It was just like, nope, it just didn't work for me. And so I don't know. To each their own, but
there's certain things you can't learn until you're ready to learn them. And I wish you could flip a switch and go, I want to learn this now. Right? Like I wish I would have learned as a kid. My mom, tried to tell me to turn lights off, and I didn't. And now that's all I do as a dad. Right? Yeah. And I'm the one screaming down the hallway. Why is every house light on? Like you can't. You can do what people can shower you and throw buckets of education at you in certain ways, but until that just gets flipped up, it doesn't happen, right? But if you think about it, I mean, what I've heard is that what happens if that dean, I think you said it was the dean, right, that you were talking to, didn't tell you about the basement?
Yeah.
What if he doesn't come up with it? Hey, you should.
Or I wouldn't have asked. I was knocking on his door.
If that conversation doesn't happen, then it's a big giant. What the hell? Then right?
Yeah.
But it didn't.
Or he could have told me, you're never going to amount to anything. You know what I mean?
Right. He could have been the vice principal from before. Look, Mick, just hang it up.
Yeah.
Just out. Just drop the mic.
It's not going to work, man. Forget about it.
Have you tried fast food?
Yeah.
Have you looked into short order line cook, because that is more your speed. But no, now you've gone and you've found that there is a literal basement to the fine arts program, and that it has this design.
The industrial design.
Industrial
So what
design.
does industrial design look back when at I guess University of Illinois in the 70s? What does that look like?
It was.
Because I'm just imagining this dusty basement, like we got the tables.
Got a bunch of long hairs.
There's studio classrooms very
Okay.
similar to architecture studios.
Awesome.
With a great shop.
Really?
With all kinds of tools. Yeah. I
So
mean,
you could
it's
draw
tool heaven.
and do. Draw and do.
Yeah.
Really?
It was, you were constantly prototyping, making furniture, doing that kind of stuff. I mean, I was like, this is school? Oh, man. Wow.
That's awesome.
Oh, it was great. It was just
So
fantastic.
materials became a big part of. Is that where materials started to actually kind of enter into your world?
I have. So my undergraduate is industrial design.
Gotcha.
And it is a fantastic foundation. It's been a fantastic foundation for me in my career and my ongoing learning process. And one of the things that I really value there is the industrial design education is very much rooted in material and process, right? So a lot of study in different kinds of materials and processes. And
They're so closely related.
yeah,
Right?
oh,
I mean, they
absolutely.
really
They're
are.
hand in
Like-
hand. It's the courses were called materials and processes.
Really? Okay. Well, there you go.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
And it's something that is sadly lacking in so much of architectural education.
Yeah,
I
you're
mean,
right.
I did testing. I taught a class at USC called Skin and Bones. It was a facades class, mostly MArcs, a few PhD students and a few undergrads. And I did testing all the way through that program. And at the beginning, these kids could not even differentiate between laminated and insulated glass.
Oh my goodness.
This is a material that's ubiquitous in architecture, right? And they knew nothing about it, And by the end of that class, it's just a one semester class. They got it. I mean, it's not that hard for them to get it, but getting it is so empowering for these young students.
Absolutely.
To know how that material works and to know that they're going to be way ahead of a lot of the practicing architects with the,
true.
the knowledge that they have.
No, I remember when I got into blast mitigation design for curtain wall and window systems when we were doing. That's when I got to know Walker. A lot of that stuff, like PVB interlayers, were just kind of like a safety thing. You know what I mean? Like it was just like, oh, it's like a windshield. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how I got introduced to it. But like really understanding the material and the process of those laminated layers and stuff was something that I gravitated to heavily. But knowing that in college when you taught that as a class, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So wildly valuable, and to have that sort of, like you said, to launch into their careers with knowing that, and that's just one piece.
Right.
That's just one piece of it. But to have that additional, ammunition in their tool belt is huge.
The other thing about the industrial design program is that they teach very overtly problem solving skills, problem solving processes. It's all about what to do when you start with a blank sheet of paper, asking the right questions, working through a problem. And there's something I think really valuable in disassociating that process from a product, because industrial designers do all manner of products from consumer goods to automobiles.
I got you now.
Medical equipment. There's all kinds of areas of specialization. But what's central to that is the problem-solving process. And buildings are the same thing. I remember an article in an old progressive architecture magazine called. It was about Norman Foster. It was called The Industrial Design of Architecture.
Okay.
And it talked about this. It talked about the fact that it was actually written by Thomas Fisher, who is the Dean of Architecture at the University of Minnesota.
Currently?
Yeah.
Okay.
Currently.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's a great guy. He's written some books. He's a brilliant guy. But this article really looked at the fact that these European architects were practicing architecture as creative problem solving. you know. And they involved industrial designers in their practice, and consequently, the buildings looked a whole lot different than our buildings did here.
Yeah, they did.
Sort of tailing out of the postmodern period, you know, in the 80s into the 90s.
Right.
You know, where if you picked up a glass publication in the U.S. at that point in time, it's not about an architecture publication.
Okay.
It's not about glass at all. It's punched openings in opaque facades.
Yeah.
Whereas in Europe, you know, Foster, Rogers, Piano, Grimshaw, these guys are doing these highly transparent, you know, facade systems with these cast fixing components and, you know, just this gorgeous stuff. And that's what I was looking at, you know. I was following those guys going, this is what I want to do,
This
you know.
is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that had the sex appeal to it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it had that
pure sex,
that
man.
absolute raw, catch your eye and keep you the whole time.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I remember I had a slide that I took, you know, I put a brick next to one of these spider castings, you know, stainless steel castings that Grimshaw did. And, you know, I would show it and say, to me, this is what buildings are about. It's, you know, it's about this is what they should be made. It's much more automotive sort of kind of thing than a brick. Now, you know, in my old age, I've developed, you know, a significant appreciation for bricks. At the time, I was seduced by, you know, totally seduced by the sexiness of this, you know, this emerging facade technology.
Yeah. And I think it's now understanding how do we incorporate all concepts and how does it make the building better, and how are we progressing the industry, and how are we keeping everything, you know, moving along. So from that, now you're in industrial design. Now you're hooked. Now they've got you 100%. You're in it. Where do you progress there? How is this relating to work yet?
So, you know, I did.
Mick's got to make some money, man.
Yeah, at some point, you got
to start getting some money making.
Yeah. So I did. I think like 2 years, and I did another semester of graduate stuff. But I was looking for a job at that point, and I did some interviews in. You know, with Hewlett Packard in Colorado, and you know, an industrial design consulting firm in Columbus, Ohio, and then I got a scholarship to go to the Aspen Design Conference, and this was a big design conference. Used to happen every year.
Okay. Always in Aspen?
Always in Aspen,
okay.
Under this big tent, fabric tent. It's morphed into something else now. I think it still goes on, but it was sort of the TED Talk of the time.
Okay,
you know?
Okay.
All right.
And, you know, a big design thing, and it was just fantastic. It was great. All these people went there, you know, and I went there, and I'm looking for a job. So I've got 35 millimeter slides of my portfolio in plastic sleeves, right? And I'm harassing everybody at this thing to look at my stuff, you know.
You're hustling.
You're working the room.
You're hustling, man.
And Ray and Charles Eames were there. You know?
So this is a big deal then.
Big deal. And I got Ray and Charles Eames to sit down with me and look at my portfolio, if you can imagine that.
No way.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fantastic, fantastic.
No, that's first of all, again, it shows the level that this festival was, or this Aspen Art
Symposium,
Aspen
conference,
Design
Conference,
yeah.
Conference.
What level that was at,
Yeah.
because that's they're hitting the big timers on that, but also to show the hustle and grind in a young Mick Patterson to be out there
Printing it out, getting the plastic
just
sleeves, and
full
just going,
assault,
you know?
bulldog style, and then making it happen. Also getting them to sit down.
Yeah.
So what was that? I mean, what was that like in the moment?
It was thrilling.
It had to be.
Absolutely thrilling.
I don't know if I'd be just excited, scared, all of it at the same time, bleeding a little bit inside, like
Right?
just trying to
Ulcer
not
flares
break
up.
out in hives.
They were so generous.
Were they?
You know, oh, yeah. They were just beautiful. I mean, just wonderful.
That's so amazing because you know you don't often find that in the people that you think you're going to find it in, and to have that happen is remarkable.
So one of the featured speakers at this thing was this guy named Peter Pierce, and I was blown away. He gets up and he starts showing these slides, and he is so I was into geometry, you know, from the Bucky Fuller influence, you know, and you know, everything, all of my design projects at U of I, the industrial design projects, became some kind of exercise in geometry, you know, and this is what he was doing. He was teaching. He had been teaching. He started a business, and he developed a series of games and toys and kites that were based on these various geometries. But he was aiming at architecture, and he had also invented a modeling tool, sticks and nodes, for modeling. Really, really an interesting tool that enabled the kind of design that we ended up doing. But he wanted to get into architecture. That's what he was aimed at, and it was space frame stuff, right?
Okay.
And if you guys remember this, back in the 80s, like the time period that the Javits Convention Center was built, that huge space frame structure.
Yeah.
Space frames they had a brief period of popularity as a dominant trend.
But massive popularity.
Yeah, massive.
A brief stint of everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we were into them. Conrad Voxman, Bucky Fuller. We were into it because it was of the performance, of the efficiency, right? These were structures where you could span twice the distance with half the weight of material, and that was the really
Just due to
compelling
the
notion
geometry.
there. But they became popular because of the aesthetic.
The aesthetic was
The
amazing.
the
There's
architects
nothing-
wanted to use
Oh.
them, So, I shanghaied him,
Okay.
and in a break, right under the tent, I made him look at my slides, and he goes, and the work that I had done spoke to, really what he was up to. So he was like, yeah, this is, I would like to do this, but I'm not in a position where I can hire you, but let's keep in touch, So I went back, and that's when I did another semester of graduate work, and I was doing some freelance consulting, doing signage, still in Illinois.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I got a call. I was just getting ready to move. I had accepted a job with Hewlett-Packard in Colorado, and I was just getting ready to move. And Peter Pierce calls me up and says, I've got a position for you. I just got a contract with Hitachi for the Consumer Electronics Show, a big 2-story space frame booth that we're going to do for them. I can't promise you more than 3 months, but I'll hire you for a 3-month period to help me do this. And I said, okay. So I packed up my drawing board and my clothes, tied the drawing board on top of my 72 Datsun station wagon, and headed west.
Love it. That's a pretty big vehicle. Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was fun.
Just tied it on top with a couple bungee cords and headed west,
Yep.
man.
And
Wow.
came through I came through the back way. I forget what the name of that road is, but I came in through the back way through the Santa Clarita Valley.
Oh, yeah, up top.
Yeah.
And then dropping down through.
And the closer I got, you saw this big old brown, smog
up on
bowl
Bakersfield
that
and then come back down and over. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, where the sky becomes very different.
Yep.
The sky
Yeah, the
becomes
sky goes
very
really
different.
different, yeah.
It goes from this blue open to less blue to brown pretty quickly.
So right away I'm like, geez, this is just what I, didn't want to do,
Where am I going?
So, and I'm staying with, guys. Rented a bedroom in a 3-bedroom house in Granada Hills, and the office is in Chatsworth, and it's just in the process of converting. They were still making the toys and stuff in a factory in the back, and we had to, and actually, Peter had started making. Peter Pierce is another notable character. I mean, he edited, Synergetics 2, Bucky's, one of Bucky's massive books. He wrote his own books. He wrote a book published by MIT Press called "Structure and Nature: A Strategy for Design." Really interesting book.
Holy cow!
Yeah, and wrote some other books on geometric principles of primer, on geometry and this kind of thing. So a real mentor to me, a real character to be able to go to work
to
with.
the industry too as well.
And he'd done some playgrounds based on these geometric principles. So he had a sort of a rudimentary connection style worked out at this point, and done some really interesting plastic saddle geometry stuff, and actually had made some of these playgrounds. But he's still wanting to do architecture. So we had to build this. This thing was not quite architecture. It was, an exposition
Piece.
Exhibition structure. But it was 2 stories. It had an integrated stairway, shelving, all this kind of stuff. It was a massive effort.
Where was this at?
This was in Las Vegas. So
Okay.
the Consumer Electronics Show happens twice a year, I think, in Las Vegas and Chicago, or at least it used to.
Okay.
I know that's still.
I know it's in Vegas every year
Yeah,
for sure.
every year, yeah. And so this was just like still being in school. We rented a warehouse space.
In the Industrial Design Studio.
Yeah, to assemble this thing. We had to come up with a connection strategy for this bigger scale. Had to hire welders, to make the pieces.
Sure.
And I mean, we had to do everything. It was just, there were just a few of us, and we had to produce this thing, and then we had to put it together to make sure it worked in this warehouse that we rented. We're working day and night. I mean,
you'd have to.
Yeah, it was just like school. It was like, you're running on fumes, very little in the way of sleep, and we put the thing together and then took it all apart and then went to Las Vegas and put it together in Las Vegas. And, this is a bunch of pieces that you got to put together. And this is not designed like trade show stuff is usually designed to be facilitated.
Totally knocked down,
really quick.
Come up quickly.
Yeah, it was. We had like 3 days to put this thing together, and it was brutal getting it together. But it turned out really great. It was really cool. And from there we got some opportunities to build some real things.
Yeah, I can
and we
imagine.
ended up building. I mean, the company was originally called Synestructics, and we did that for 3 years, and then we started to get more opportunities, and we started what we call Pierce Structures, and I was a minority owner in that company. So at this point, I'm an entrepreneur, and Peter's got his name on the door, but we're doing some big projects at that time. Like we did the plaza over the Cover of Nations in Vancouver for Expo '84.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
was.
it was 84. Yep.
And we did the Biosphere 2. The enclosure in the desert, in Arizona, where
You did that?
Yeah. We did
Really?
that whole enclosure. We did the space frame structure, and we also designed the glass system.
I remember reading about that in the biosphere structure, and just how kind of like the
It was the
right?
platform of everything that was educational at the time.
was.
That
I
was
mean,
huge.
the whole science world and everything like
Yeah,
that.
it was. I mean, it was a wild project. It was very controversial.
It was.
People
It
are
was
still writing
extreme.
about it. I just saw an
Extremely
article.
controversial.
It still is a topic
Yeah.
regularly mentioned in a lot
it
of
is.
ways.
It is.
Wow. So you guys are just kind of cowboys out there, because it's not like you're just creating these one things or these
Or building elementary schools or something like that.
I'll tell you what, so, from there, I did that. That was a 12-year run for me, that work with Peter Pierce. And all this time I'm watching this, like I said, watching the stuff that's going on in Europe, and Grimshaw and Piano and Rogers and these guys, and I'm going, man, I'd sure like to do some of that stuff, because everything that we were doing with the space frame stuff, it all had glass on it. It was all about, it wasn't about the efficiency of these structures. It was about the appearance. So
Yeah, it was aesthetic, for sure.
So, I'm going, wow, these stainless steel components and these tension structures is a lot more interesting to me. But, Peter Pierce wasn't going there. This was a space frame company. And, so there were a couple people there that I was very strongly connected to. And we to make a long story short, we ended up starting Advanced Structures Incorporated, ASI, in 1991 to pursue those opportunities, right?
Yep.
So,
Just because you saw the projects and the different integration of materials.
I'm going to the,
I
I spent time with the architects. That was
Yeah.
my job at Pierce, and they're all going, they started to, and then increasingly as we moved towards 1990, they're like, I don't want to do a space frame. I want to do something like what Grimshaw's doing in England, and this
Absolutely they
point
do.
supported glass and all this kind of thing, and I want to go, yeah, we can do that,
Because you can.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
should probably.
yeah. So that's what
Yeah.
ASI
So
was.
is that where the structural glass wall idea kind of came in when you started working with ASI, or started actually? Well, I guess you founded ASI.
Founded ASI with TJ DeGagna and Franz Safford. The three of us founded it in 1991. Yeah.
Okay, and so that's
And now it's all. Then from that moment, you started jumping into the tension cable and structural glass fittings.
Right
and
away.
Big
So
structural glass elements.
we
and-
started it out of our back pockets. I mean, we had 35 cents, between
love
us,
it.
and
Yeah, but 35 cents in 1991 is like that's almost like
2 candy bars, right?
it's like 65 cents today.
Inflation.
No, but that's so yeah, you guys are shoestring budget, cut in a third.
Yeah.
And then, trying to get this thing off that is wildly customized to a certain degree and conceptual in almost every way.
Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. I
Well,
mean,
it was wild. I mean, we had some connections of architects that wanted to do this stuff, and the difference was all of a sudden they're bringing us in and we want to do this, and we're saying, yeah, we can do that, but you're going to have to pay us.
sure.
And that changes everything. But they wanted to do it. We could do it. Okay, we'll pay you.
No,
So all of us, right away, we're a consultancy. We hadn't thought any of this out, So we're working as a specialty consultant, sort of,
Okay.
and working for the architects basically.
From a design side.
Yeah, from the design side, because that's what we thought of ourselves as. We were designers.
Sure.
That's
Industrial designers.
it was. We didn't different. Whenever I have to write down my occupation, to this day, what do you do? I'm a designer. That's that's the way we thought of ourselves. But we also we were very hands-on designers. We always
I was
built
just gonna
everything
say,
we
like,
designed.
if you
With the space frames, I had to figure out how to design the system. I had to hire the welders to
Yeah.
make it. What kind of
what kind of weld
how does
happens?
how do the welds work? Engineers. I had to bring in engineers to put the numbers together to make sure that
Be like, this is how you got to do it. So make sure that these are calculated properly. Just go and run the math for me.
right. And then
Wow.
and then they come back and go, hey, this has got to be this much bigger. And I go, wait, that's got to be wrong. That's it
be
can't be.
wrong.
That doesn't make any sense. And they go, all right, well, let us look at it again. That's when I learned that engineering is as much of an art as it is a science. And
For sure.
And there are these guys, there's engineers out there, most of them are number crunchers.
Yeah.
But there are these design engineers like Bucky Fuller, like Peter Rice,
Yeah.
like Jörg Schleich. These guys are my heroes. I mean, they are design engineers. They understand materials and processes. They understand the numbers, but they're at their core, they're designers.
Interesting. So structural glass walls comes into existence. Was this something obviously that you pulled from the space frame, but then integrated and it went off very well, or was it something that kind of you had to kind of integrate from a convincing side of things?
It's an ongoing voyage of discovery, right?
Sure.
So the architects that we knew, we get this little consulting contract, which barely covers.
It just fueled a little bit of the.
We're making $5 an hour at this point or something.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
All right.
And so the designs are like, the architect goes, yeah, this is great, man. And so we meet with the building team, and the building team is like, all right, this is great, but who's going to fabricate it? Who's going to erect it? And there was nobody.
Wow.
Nobody. There was nobody
yeah.
doing, architecturally exposed structural steel or any of that kind of stuff. So we go, we'll do that.
Well, really?
We're still in the mode of,
Yes, we can.
Yes, we
We
can.
can.
Yes, we can.
Absolutely, we can.
Climb
And we
that
will.
telephone pole.
Yeah,
I
right.
like it.
It's same thing. So now you're in this world of creation, design, figuring it out, and now execution. That's a lot. That's a lot to take on and to push through.
Never even heard of design build before, but that's what we're doing.
100%,
Design build.
yeah.
I mean, I swear to God, after that, it took me, I don't know how long, but probably close to another 10 years before I figured out that what we really were, in terms of how the world, the AECO world looked at us, we're a contractor. I didn't know it. I mean, it just, it was like it was an epiphany at some point along the way that, geez, I never set out to be a contractor, but that's, effectively what we are.
Well, it's an interesting role actually back in the 90s and early 2000s. If you actually think about it, like there's not anybody really doing any of that like integrated, like I'm a designer. We actually do and procure all the material, and then we actually do the fabrication and erection for it. Like this whole kind of like soup to nuts experience doesn't really exist in during those 2 decades at least. I think there was so much of the segregated understanding of like, well, you're a manufacturer, you make those things, you also design those things, but you don't necessarily design them from an architectural experience, you design them from a manufacturing experience, right?
Yeah.
It's just a different venue. And then, but for you to actually take kind of that entire process all the way down, was it kind of just like, well, this is what we do because we said yes?
Yeah, because
You know
why
what
say
I mean?
no?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, well, that's what I am?
Yeah.
Did I know that?
Yeah.
It's a really interesting kind of epiphany.
Yeah.
And where does this happen geographically?
Yeah.
Is this
So
still,
this is
still
LA.
LA?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is still LA.
So this is still LA.
Yeah.
Now you guys are doing it, and you're starting to get more. And is it mostly happening in the California market, or is
No.
this now global where the New York side and the other coast is
Starting
just
to call you in.
One of Franz, one of the partners lived in New York. Okay. So and most of the opportunities were in New York, and he was our lead, market development guy. So he had a lot of connections with the architects, and that was our primary prospect flow at that time came through him. And a lot of the projects were in New York City.
That's where the money was. That's where the building was.
Yeah.
That's where the architects were in
Are
that world.
Are there a lot of those structural walls still
yeah.
still available and still up?
Yeah. There's a lot of them still up. I mean, so what we had to do was a lot of a core thing was steel fabrication, right? I mean, we're doing curtain wall, but it's not aluminum and glass. It's not extrusions. It's steel structure, and it's exposed steel. Wow. So the welds got to look good, and at that point, nobody knows where to do that or how to talk about it or how to much less specify it or whatever.
Right.
And we just couldn't find fabricators that were capable of doing it. So we had to start our own steel fabrication operation.
Oh my God.
And learn AESS and learn how to do a good weld.
Well, not only
and
learn
train welders
but almost define it
Yeah.
to a certain degree, because AESS wasn't written in a lot of the drawings that were coming around at that point, right? Because steel was what it was. It was this structural element that you would spend all of your time hiding after that.
Yeah.
Cladding it,
Right.
putting something on and around it.
Yeah, plus or minus an inch.
You don't want to see it. It's
Oh my
hidden.
gosh.
It's hidden behind this or this or this, and there's a bunch of room because it's not going to be in the space you think it's going to be in when it's all done, right?
Yeah,
And now they're saying, well, this is an architectural element.
right,
It's now this aesthetic piece that we want to highlight and showcase.
right.
What the hell are you talking
Yeah,
about?
what the hell are you talking
Yeah.
about?
I don't know what kind of weed they got in LA, but us New Yorkers, we don't know what that's going on. Was it a very open arms? We love what you're doing, or was it get the hell out of here, you crazy person?
Well, one of the aspects of this, there's a lot of aspects of it. I mean, one of the aspects was, we start out as a consultant to the architect, and then at some point we become a contractor to the general contractor, and they don't like that.
Just because of how integrated
You're
were?
crossing that wall
You're
between design and build. You're crossing that wall, and anytime, and the system is still this way.
You're right.
It's still this way. Anytime you cross over that, the whole thing is set up this way. The insurance and surety companies, right? Like the surety companies don't like it if you do design.
No.
And the professional liability companies don't like it if you build the stuff that you design.
For sure.
And so there were all kinds of problems. That was the biggest problem that we had. That and stuff like, it's like when we started out in 1991, bonding was around.
Okay.
But it was something that you could almost always talk your way out of.
It was like BIM today.
Basically.
Like when you go on a university job and they're like, hey, we need BIM on this
we
job.
need BIM level 500.
Yeah, and then they're like,
Okay,
okay,
great.
here's 65 or 150 grand, whatever it is. Yeah, we probably don't need that.
I mean, BIM isn't that important.
No, I'm just saying.
No, but bonding, it was
Bonding, yeah, go
it
ahead.
was probably not as universally understood in any way. So that's not happening. And then increasingly, does it become more and more of a
Yeah, it becomes. I mean, bonding. For example, your bonding capacity was in those early days was calculated as 20 times working capital. That was the rule of thumb, and that gave you a pretty decent bonding line. But we were constantly pushing. That was always the limit to growth, for our business. So the focus on financials was about building that working capital number so we could increase the line.
Man.
And then then we moved into you get into the early aughts, and post 9/11 and Katrina, the surety markets just collapsed and it became brutal.
total implosion?
Yeah.
Well, it aligned so much with this. And then just right after that, so 2005 was Katrina, right? And then the economic mortgage faucet shut off, right? And so the housing crisis started to happen, and then everybody, general contractors had a great idea of pre-qual forms, right?
Yeah.
Let's do the Proctor test prior to the operation, right? So it was geez, what a time, man, to actually then come back around in it. So ASI survived it.
We did. I mean, well, sort of. I mean, we ran for 16 years.
All right.
And we were sitting in the 2005 2006 timeframe, and we're sitting on the biggest backlog that we've ever had. And every one of those projects required bonding. We had contracts in hand, but we had to bond them. And all of a sudden we're in the zone where nobody's letting you talk your way out of bonding. You got to provide a bond, and we just couldn't do it. We didn't have. I mean, the sureties are looking at that point for collateral. And we're like, what the hell is that?
Right? No.
and so we needed the business model. The business environment had changed.
Absolutely. It thrust you between a rock and a hard place.
And our business model no longer worked.
Right.
So we need to either look for a financial partner, which we started to do, or what happened, what ended up happening was our biggest customer was Enclose.
Okay.
The big national curtain wall company.
Yep.
And, Enclose would do these jobs, and our structural glass facade work a lot of times was the lobby area. It was a feature area, but Enclosed really didn't want to do that. They wanted to do the whole 60, 70 stories of curtain wall.
Right.
But they, the general contractor would be, I want to have a package, and
Yeah,
so
I mean to capture the scope. It's not so much about the curtain wall glass, but let's talk about scope. Yeah,
right,
I get it.
Right. So they would buy our services, engineered materials. Usually they would do the installation themselves, but we would do the design, engineering, and provide the cable systems and then supervise the installation for them. But their guys, their laborers would do it, and they're great at that kind of stuff. So we had the attention of the owner of Enclose, a guy that we knew, a young guy, really cool guy. Really liked us, liked what we were doing.
That's awesome.
But we're at that point, and he's got even at this point in time, he's got an unlimited bonding line. And he's looking at us going, you guys are a problem for me. My bonding company looks at you as a primary supplier, and they don't like it that you guys can't bond work. Why don't I acquire you?
Right.
Oh wow.
And then you guys can share my bonding line. And this sounded really good, and
it was easy. Sounds amazing.
It was easy, it was easy.
It sounded good.
But and we thought it was good because we knew Enclosed better than anybody else, and we felt like we were culturally very, very close to them. And it turned out to be, there's a lot more to this cultural thing.
A lot of onion layers there.
Yeah.
And Enclosed was still a pretty young company technically at that point.
Yes.
In 2007, they were still a pretty junior company as Enclose.
Well, they were, but they had it down. I mean, they
had it figured out.
They were, you know. So we were acquired at the very beginning of 2007, and they'd been through years of glory days in the curtain wall industry, where, you know, the geometry was flat orthogonal surfaces, aluminum and glass, high margins. You know, they were having a ball. You know, they were really
they were kind of one of the only 2 or 3 players in the game to tell you at the level of contracting, right? I mean, I remember them. So I'm from Southwest Utah. They had a fabrication and a glazing assembly plant like in 2009 and 10 at that right across from Virocon's plant back in St. George, and it was interesting I walked through the plant, got to see a lot of it, and it was pretty rudimentary. You know, that's when I think they were actually doing the Gates Foundation building in that facility, and then shipping it up there. But really kind of, I mean, I say one of the only players in the game in rudimentary, but very innovative at the same time. I don't want to necessarily take any of that away from them, because they were kind of that groundbreaking technology in full-fledged scope, steel, glass, aluminum, curtain wall.
For sure. And they had a long lineage. A lot of people that, you know, Enclosed wasn't that old of a company at that moment in terms of lineage, but they were all born out of the apogee cell of Harman Limited.
Right, exactly.
You know, and so Harman Limited, they had a tremendous amount of heavily experienced people who've done stuff all over the globe at that point, right? They've done stuff in Singapore and France and all over the world. They've done tremendous structures, and then they become Enclosed, and they just keep getting better and better as they go on. Now they've got this amazing supplier that can't bond, so they think they're gonna swoop in, save the day, and so now at 2007, they make an offer to ASI to acquire. It seems like it's the right thing, and now we progress on, and does everybody at ASI does everybody transfer over then and take a role?
Yeah, they do. I mean, at that point, so there's some complexities to this deal. Our steel fabrication operation, which was called ASI Truss Works, they didn't want that. I'd been spending most of my time in Asia. We had a company called ASI Asiatic, and we did the glass walls for the new Bangkok airport, and we had an office in Taipei, in Kaohsiung, in Taiwan, and in Shanghai, in China. And that was a good, strong operation with a lot of potential going on over there. And they didn't want that, right? Okay. But you know, we did this, and so we spun these other things off, and partners in the business took them.
Okay.
And we went with Enclosed. And what happened was the original. I mean, it's a long story, but you know, the bottom line is that while the original intention had been to run ASI continue to run it as ASI.
Correct. Yeah.
It ended up being a merger, and there was a cultural meltdown in the process, and the 70 plus people that went from ASI to Enclosed, probably within 3 months, 60 of those had quit.
Wow.
60.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big number.
Yeah,
pretty big number. I just wanted to make sure I clarified.
Out of
that.
7-0.
And there were several of them at the thing yesterday. At the
really?
Thing. Yeah, they're out there in
the world.
Industry.
Yeah, and these are the kids out there that used to drive me crazy because they would bitch constantly about
Sure.
I love it.
our processes and the way things work. It was a little chaotic. I mean, we were hiring kids right out of college, and the next thing they're sitting next to Renzo Piano designing some wild thing. I mean, it was immediately into the frying pan and we're all designers here.
Just go.
Design is problem solving. Yeah. Figure it out.
Get in there.
But it was a great environment for these people, and now they're, now every time I see them, they're like, yeah, man, those were the glory days.
Yeah.
Days.
I can imagine. That's pretty awesome.
Those were the glory days. I mean, but again, you were probably the guy yelling, turn the lights off.
Yeah.
And now they're coming back and they'll be like, I get it. I tell my people to turn the lights off all the time.
It got to be not a lot of fun for me because I was the guy that was dealing with the the surety guys, the insurance
Contract,
guys.
the monies, yeah.
I'm a designer,
No.
it's like, hey, wait a minute, nobody told me that this is,
Really, yeah, nobody told you that entrepreneurial spirits were going to get you to that spot.
yeah.
Interesting. So end close, and then how was that evolution happen?
So end close. So this is 2007, and TG and I had as part of this deal, we had contracts with Enclose for 2 years, right? And the first thing they told us, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to sell a bunch of stuff. They're going to put me to work, and I'm going to be out on the street really selling.
Right.
And the first thing they told me was, whatever you do, don't sell anything. And
Really?
they kind of just, they kind of put us in a corner and just didn't ask us to do anything. It was very strange, and we thought, we're going to work through the 2 years thing, and then they're just going to let us go. And
Yeah, sure.
so we started putting our own consultancy together,
Sure.
doing a little, design projects on the side.
Okay.
And, we designed a modular fabric tension structure, and stuff like that. And then, coming into these guys, the Enclosed guys are great. They're awesome. I mean, in my mind, they are. The leading curtain wall company.
I would agree.
And their strength is in their project management and their site operations. And when you're doing business, when you're doing curtain wall in the United States, that's what you got to have, to make it happen.
They are by far, in my opinion, and I come from that world, they are the ones who improve the industry by driving it the farthest and the hardest.
Yeah.
They don't always get the recognition they deserve, and they don't always do exactly the thing that needs to happen in the moment, just like every company that exists out there. But by far the best driver when it comes to embracing the understanding of the design, embracing that we'll design it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We get what you're saying. And that I think is evident. If you look at a lot of these companies, company X, Y, and Z, there are certain companies that do phenomenally well at solving small problems and then repeating that solve over 40 floors of 2 styles of typical unit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's that. And it does take a process to even get there, because that's not stick built, infill at the Taco Bell, which is its own creature. Right.
Yep.
But then there's Y, who can kind of blend the worlds a little bit, but don't give me a podium. Don't give me anything in the middle. Don't give me anything structural. I don't want it. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to look at it. And then there's somebody who's like Enclosed, who wants bits and pieces of all of that because they're enticed by the prospect of, let's do it. Let's figure it out. Let's be the ones, right?
Yeah.
And then let's turn it into a case study. Let's understand it even further. And then let's share that information with the industry as well, right? Let's push that information out there.
Yeah.
Almost nobody else is doing that.
Yeah.
And they do deserve a tremendous amount for that piece of helping further the industry and better the industry.
I can't say enough positive things about them. And you're right, they don't get the recognition they deserve. But so we're like a year and a half into this merger thing, and so we're moving into 2000. We're into 2008.
Okay.
And
the good days are almost here.
Yeah, they're right. And the Enclosed guys are, the management guys there are really sharp guys, and they track market cycles, and they saw this coming, and they also recognize that that while they were definitely playing a leadership role in the marketplace, they weren't recognized as the most technically superior.
Okay,
of the curtain wall companies.
Okay.
I mean, you got guys like Permis out there, for example,
Right.
That has a market reputation for leading edge technology.
Technology, yeah.
And I think Enclosed's reputation was much more about they get the job done, they're cost competitive, they're on schedule. That kind of really important stuff.
Sure.
But they knew,
important.
they knew that they had some opportunity, and they knew that the technology was changing in the market, right?
Yeah.
That there were trends at work that were escalating this, right? So at some point, they're talking about this, and they go, hey, we got these 2 guys sitting over there in the corner. They're supposed to be, technology is supposed to be their thing. Let's talk to them, and so they pulled TJ and I in, to make another long story short, we ended up doing a proposal for them for what became the Advanced Technology Studio, which is
that's
basically
awesome.
taking the ASI business model and morphing it into, a dedicated studio for Enclosed. And what we did at ASI was we had a multidisciplinary, very young team. It wasn't just it was architects, engineers, industrial designers, all kinds of, and very international. We had people from every country, France, China. I mean, it was India. It was, I used to call it a mini United Nations,
Yeah.
It was a fantastic environment to work in. It was just really great and fun and stuff. So, we basically proposed the same thing on a little bit smaller scale. I think originally we had like a dozen positions that we identified. But even so, it's, we need an office, we need computers. It wasn't cheap.
Sure. No, absolutely.
And the owner looked at this and said, I love it, and pulled his checkbook out and signed off on the whole thing.
Let's make it work.
Yeah. And so we did it. We started it. We went from 0 to 60 in like 6 weeks, and hired a bunch of young kids, and and did the stuff. And the idea was that we can begin to service the architects at a much higher level than we have in the past, right? The architects need this kind of support. Facade systems are getting more complex.
Yeah.
They're getting more geometrically complex. There's more materials that are being involved in the building skin. All right, let's have some industrial designers on staff that understand materials and processes. All of a sudden, the contribution of these people becomes really valuable. So immediately there was engagement from the architectural community.
I can only imagine, man. That's
Yeah,
that's phenomenal.
At the highest level. I mean, you're talking the major European architects are like, yeah. I mean, we worked with, with Piano and Rogers and these guys, and they were super excited and super happy to have somebody like this in the United States to work with. They really loved what we did. It was
Well, you're speaking on the same level. You're creating in a world where you are an extension of what they're trying to get out there. They have the concept of the aesthetic, and now you're the reality.
Yeah.
And you're all in alignment and talking together. That's huge.
And the other thing that you pointed out that they let us do in the studio. So TJ is managing the design and engineering part of the operations. And they've got me looking at business development and marketing and stuff like this. And at this point, Enclosed doesn't even have a brochure.
Right. No, absolutely.
Arguably they didn't need one, but still, the guy, the owner had seen, I had to do all of my own marketing and graphic design and stuff at ASI. Nobody else was there to do that, so I did it. And he'd come through and see it, go, I love this stuff. Yeah. And so, when we're launching the studio thing, he's like, Mick, can you do that for us? And I said, sure, that sounds great. And it was great because I got to do the deep dive on the history of Enclosed, and I did this
in order to tell the story and extract the story out of it. That's awesome.
That's what it's about. Marketing is telling stories, right?
Absolutely.
So, I did what we called the white book, which was not just brochures, but had technical data on all of this long history of projects that, that Enclosed have been involved with. Like you said, and the owner of Enclosed also owned couples.
Yeah.
And so, you've got basically, between Enclosed, Harmon, couples, Enclosed embodied all of that work, which was all of the early,
and again, all bred out of the Midwest, all bred out of the Minneapolis-ish area,
which is still the center of the universe, center of the universe for Cornwall.
It's still the epicenter of things that happen in that world. And it's just because even Perm Stelice is there, and everybody's right there.
Yeah.
So now you're in the heart of doing so many different things within Enclosed, and you're having a blast. And this is a point in my mind where Enclosed starts to also go down a path that a lot of glazing subcontractors were very resistant to, and they weren't, at least outside looking in, and that is facades that weren't just glass and glazing. Because there was a very tight, organized, this is the box we kind of live in. And there's doors, sure, different kinds of doors and swing doors and revolving. But then when you're talking about the actual skin, the facade, the curtain wall aspects of stuff, whether it's unitized or whatever it is, it's glass and it's aluminum, and it's either a single leg or a double leg stack, and it is what it is. But now they're starting to get into a world that is nothing to do with, I mean, it's barely looking reminiscent of curtain wall, and it 100% is curtain wall.
Yeah.
That was, to me, one of the most fascinating things to watch over the last 15, 20 years was watch that evolution of glass is great. This is a new thing that we're going to infill. And this is a new thing we're going to infill. And we're going to do this. And we're going to push the limit. And we're going to double skin. And we're going to triple. Like, just watching all of those projects come out in about that time period was phenomenal to see outside looking in.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so the studio played a key role in enabling that, that kind of stuff. And the point that you were making, Enclose allowed us to share that.
Yeah,
it was like, okay, to me that's marketing. Marketing is if you're doing great stuff, all you got to do is share it, and you don't need to worry about marketing. You know what I mean? So
you just got to tell each other about it.
We were publishing a book that we called Insight, which was about the. So when we put the proposal together,
right,
the idea was half of this would be what we started to call design assist.
Okay.
Which is now a term that you hear
all the time.
There's varying definitions of that, but we were calling what we did design assist.
There is varying definitions.
And the other part of it was offline R&D, which our industry is very poor at doing that and funding that and that kind of thing. And the owner of Enclose bought off on that, As it turned out, the press was so much for the design assist stuff, the R&D stuff was compromised to some extent, but still we did a lot of it, and we would publish the R&D stuff in this Insight publication, which was a really nice visually, everything that we did had to be visual, super high quality, right? Because our clients are architects, and that's where they're at,
Well, the format of the studio, I thought, is just such a innovative way to communicate the story, because it actually it's like walking into someone's living room that they're so familiar with, right? They understand their household, they understand that, and like they're so comfortable within their own home. Like that studio aspect of it, the Advanced Design Studio is you're actually bringing the architects and those designers and those design influencers into that space where, where they studied, or how they studied, how they learned architecture. It was kind of a genesis of a space where they felt familiar with it. As a result, how comfortable were they to actually start talking about innovation, introducing that story?
Yeah.
Why now performance became an issue? Now we're looking at, adjusting aluminum dies and understanding different chassis and what actually works structurally and that process for it. But for some reason, the common theme of this industrial design studio of the basement of U of I, just continues to then permeate where we're at, right? It really does.
It's popping its head up everywhere.
It does. Like that business model of actually just bringing the materials and process, because I still think that was the genesis of architecture in the day, of understanding what wood did and how the glass came together and what gypsum was so why that was innovative when it came to actually, rather than the plaster that was going on the walls, right? It's all these different materials of bringing into it.
Yeah.
And now you're just basically still doing the same thing as when you were at U of I, just like let's do materials process and let's actually bring it to a storytelling point.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And market
except at some point, this whole thing sort of continues to grow on me, right? At some point there was a recognition, this whole sustainability thing, right?
Well, that's where I kind of wanted to go, as far as now you're just understanding the sustainability of design. But,
right.
Okay.
Well, this goes back to the late 60s, early 70s, and the energy crisis in the 70s. And we didn't have that term sustainability yet, but there was a very high level of environmental consciousness, and it's really sort of distressing at some point sometimes to think about what we did understand back then and how little was done over the intervening decades to deal with it. But I've always had a strong orientation in that direction.
Okay,
and at some point I began, and always a close affiliation with architecture and buildings. And at some point, I mean, it's really interesting, right? At some point, to the astonishment of the architecture profession, buildings are revealed as a huge part of the sustainability problem.
Oh, absolutely.
And these, architects are like, wow, these buildings that we've been designing and constructing are close to 50% of the problem, the carbon problem.
It's such a wake up for them. Yeah.
Big time. And it wasn't that long ago. I mean, I got to sit down and figure out exactly when, that started to emerge. But it was like, I think it's got to be like 15 years ago or something like that. Maybe, when it's like it was around 2000. So maybe it was like 20 years ago. That.
When the term green building kind of came into existence.
USGBC LEED started the program, and and that really started the dialogue about, oh, geez, we got to do something about buildings.
Yeah,
it's.
But you're right. You said almost 50%, and they say the building sector is responsible for just about 50% of all greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
That's a big number.
Yeah, it is a big number.
And that's a massive number that demands attention.
It's as much as the industrial and transportation sectors combined.
Right.
Which shocked me, because I thought most of it would be in transportation. Intuitively, that's what I.
But it is that silent killer.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, not to put too harsh of a term on it, but it is. It's the one you don't look at. It's the guy who always ends up being the serial killer that lives near you. It's the quiet guy who you never would have suspected was doing the damage he was doing. When you think of the buildings, you think of, okay, we're building them based on performance, right? Yeah. Performance is a big word that we don't know anything about and we don't put any value on anymore, because high performance glass, and it performs air and water and seismic, and it's high performance, right? But is it a Jeep that you're wanting to do a road race with, or is it a Ferrari that you're trying to take off road?
Yeah.
Performance is all relative when you start to get into those worlds.
Yeah.
And we don't think of it as, okay, it's performing, but what is it doing for the environment? What's it doing for sustainability? What's it doing to reuse water or reuse heat or create energy? It seems like even now we should be doing this on every single structure that gets thought of, and we don't. We miss a lot of the boat. I want to talk because I wrote down, based on a 2007 performance goal study that was done, the goals were by 2030 to have all new U.S. commercial buildings to be net zero. That's 2030, right? All U.S.
You're talking about the energy and independent. Yeah,
exactly.
That's the 2007 under the Bush administration.
Under the Bush administration,
the right goals. By the way,
exact right goals. Yeah. That's why I think they deserve getting looked at. 2030, all new U.S. commercial buildings. 2040, all new, and then 50% existing, basically retroed over, and then by 2050, all new, and then 100% conversion.
Yeah.
And I think those are the absolute right goals. And I'm curious how you feel. Are we getting there? Are we close? Are we on track? Are we way off path? Like, are there any studies out there that you know of that are saying, here's the goal that we're trying to get to by 2045 or 2050, and here's where we're trending?
We are, we're missing it at a very fundamental level, I think.
Okay. Seems like it, yeah.
So at some point, considering the sustainability thing, so, I start to learn about the facade because I'm building them, and, glass, it emerges as a problem, and
right.
this is the material that I'm working a lot with,
Sure.
So, I study that, come to an understanding of that. And at some point, I come to a realization that the building skin is really the linchpin to attaining sustainability in buildings and urban habitat.
Okay.
And why isn't anybody talking about that? You hear people talking about sustainability. You go to sustainability conferences, and there's not one thing there on the building skin.
No, it's all about mechanical systems and how efficient they are, type of a thing, and
right.
Yeah, and how are we loading them properly? It's like, wait a minute.
So then, and I'm in this sort of very this cauldron
or bamboo flooring.
I'm in this cauldron of really of energy at the Advanced Technology Studio of Enclose, and a very sort of nurturing environment, and I mean it was really good. And this dialogue starts to grow, and it's too big for the studio, and I want to take it outside, and Close encourages that.
Okay.
And so at this point, I'm, this is another thread, but I'm back in school,
Okay.
and I have a vehicle through that at USC. I'm in the Master's of Building Science program at USC, and so I've got another platform to use, and I put together these with Doug Noble at Professor Noble at the school, these roundtables, and we invited 20, 30 people to these early roundtables to talk about the building skin. This was actually triggered by going to a conference at Columbia University called Engineered Transparency. It was part of a series of material-focused conferences that they did, and this was on glass, and it blew me away. I mean, it was just amazing. A lot of Europeans came over and presented, and I came back, and I had this vision of what could happen at the school, and I came back and talking about focusing the building science program there on facade related stuff, and having some conferences. And the first step in this was doing these roundtables, and we pulled together these 25, 30 people, general contractors, architects, mix of consultants, and there was a lot to talk about, and there was a lot of interest in doing this. This is in 2007.
Okay.
And that's when we started. We started right away calling it Facade Tectonics, and that grew into there were a few more roundtables, and then we had our first little conference at the school, and then that grew, and ultimately in 2015 we established the Facade Tectonics Institute, which is a nonprofit corporation, member-based corporation. We started taking our first members in 2015, and we just upped the game, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Definitely did.
so
Definitely upped the game.
and the validation of that was continues to be, people continue to show up. There is
Sure.
a lot to talk about when you
There's
get to
a
the
lot.
building skin, and I don't think we've even tapped begun to tap what that dialogue is really about, but it's so building skin, right?
Yeah.
So to go back to your question, we're in a point right now where you're talking about the goals that have been put in place, and some very simple things to consider, right? We don't have the technology at this point to do this net zero stuff
By
in the
2030.
building skin on high-rise, especially on high-rise buildings, okay?
Sure, which is a significant amount of production of construction that's happening right now.
Yeah. There's a lot of bits and pieces in it.
Sure.
Okay, now let's look at another adjacent reality. There's a lot of these early curtain wall buildings built in the mid 20th century, when curtain wall was first introduced as a cladding technology.
Yeah.
And they're problematic, right? They were designed for buildings where the durability of the buildings in terms of the architect, the service life was going to be 20 years or so, right? So they weren't designed to last. Now some of them have been in service for 50, 60 years.
Correct.
And they're not in good shape. They need to be retrofit, and they're problematic.
Yeah.
They're tough to do. Very little in the way of options. So you end up in most cases, the cheapest thing to do is to tear the entire system off and put a whole new one up.
Yep.
And if you look at the problem there, if you study that problem, which is what I did, I went on from my MBS to somehow they talked me into doing a PhD, and this was my area of study. Just from walking in LA, and at this point I was spending half my time in New York City and walking around New York City and looking at these buildings.
Yep.
And thinking about, wow, what happens when these things get too old? How do you deal with that? So I got into this stuff and discovered that it was really a big problem. And there's two components to the problem. One is it's expensive.
Very
and
expensive.
that prevents the owners from doing that. But even more than that is it's hugely disruptive to ongoing building operations.
Oh, yeah.
And there's very few of these buildings where,
Oh, yeah.
like the United Nations Secretariat building, where they can afford to, empty the building and relocate everybody for 2 years while they do a building skin retrofit.
No, I mean, if you're lucky enough to have it be a structure where the owner is on board financially, and that you can relocate so that you have full access to the exterior facade. Full access to the exterior facade is still a fantasy almost, because you're in the tightest of tight working conditions, because in all likelihood, this building may have been on the only one on the block then, and it's not now,
Yeah.
right? Because it is now swamped in on all access. So just being able to touch that building is an almost impossibility.
Not to mention 60 or 70 stories up.
Yeah,
in the building.
way up in the sky.
Yeah.
So you're talking,
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of feet in the air, and now you're going to do this thing that can't be done.
Yeah. So if you look at the source of this problem, the root of this problem in the early, looking forensically at the
Sure.
the precedent technology, the problem is it's not adaptable.
Right.
It does not lend itself to. They did not anticipate the need for future retrofits. They didn't think about that at all. Consequently, it's really hard to do any kind of minimal intervention in these systems. So you end up having to tear the whole thing down, put a
Right.
new one up. The disturbing part of that is we're doing the same thing today, and we're building these things like mad.
It hasn't changed one bit.
In fact, I would say that the unitized systems that we're building today are going to be more difficult to retrofit than the old stick-built systems were from the mid-20th century.
No question. There's so much more geometrical things that are happening. There's so much more that is engaging in, through, around, and near the curtain wall system. It's just, it is an absolute mind F of how much is going on in those things.
So then you take it back to your point, right? Which is these goals.
Yep,
Okay.
the goals.
So we're building these buildings. We know that they're going to have to be retrofit to meet these goals.
Right.
They're going to have. You want to do every building. So you're building a building now. Call it 2020.
Correct.
30 years out to 2050. That building has got to be, net zero, right?
Yeah.
Yet, what we're building it today, it's not net zero.
No.
The technology is not there for it to be net zero. It needs to be net zero ready, which means that facade system needs to anticipate the need for retrofit, for adaptation of future technology. And it's not. No. I have yet to find a curtain wall system that, today, a contemporary system on the boards now that is being designed in anticipation of this need for retrofit.
By
No.
2050.
Yeah,
Wow.
by 2050.
Jeez.
I don't know of any that are thinking about it by 2075 or 2080.
So in a very real way, we are super busy now building tomorrow's problems.
We are just compounding
That's all we're doing.
tomorrow's problems. I mean, a lot of the curtain walls that we see today, it's almost impossible for my brain to wrap around how you would replace a piece of glass, even.
Yeah.
Let alone the entire structure itself. But even just glass replacement on some of these structures is mind-numbing.
Yeah, some of the unitized systems, you can't even get to
There's
the
so
joint
much
of
going
the-
on that from a tooling aspect, from getting in there, from a swing stage is almost impossible because of the geometries that are happening or the fins that are occurring through and around. I mean, I can't even imagine replacing glass on some of these.
Yeah.
So they're definitely not trending towards the direction. In fact, I can't think of a single one in my experience in the curtain wall industry. I can't think of a single time where it came up with, is this being constructed for the concept of retrofit, or is this being constructed for the concept of maintenance even?
Well, I mean, the only thing that I think
No,
think
yeah,
of
exactly.
It's
Maintenance.
not. It's
maintenance.
Yeah. So this is the thing, this introduces the whole embodied carbon problem.
Yeah.
Which I think we should talk about.
Yeah,
I
we
think you should. I think you should introduce
Yeah.
it for a little bit.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we've been, so what's amazing about this sustainability thing is, in the same way that the building sector was revealed as a huge component of the sustainability problem, the carbon problem, the most recent revelation, I would say, is this culprit of embodied carbon. So when we went to work on the carbon problem in the built environment, the focus was on new buildings,
Okay.
and on operational energy consumption. The carbon is generated during the operational cycle from the time they turn the switch on, occupancy
start
of the
building it.
building, not to start building it,
Okay.
to start, when the building's been built
occupied.
and it's occupied and you commence operations.
Got
right?
it.
And in spite of the fact that the large majority of buildings are already built, and they represent the biggest opportunity to impact the overall performance of the built environment, the focus has persisted on new buildings and on energy consumed during the operational cycle. Well, the other component of this is the materiality of these buildings, right? All of these materials, from the time of extraction through multiple cycles of manufacturing and production and transport and all this stuff, have to make it to the building site, be installed, have to be maintained throughout the life cycle of that building. And at the end of the building's lifespan, the disposal, the energy that's involved in transport and whatever reuse or recycling or landfill or whatever, all of that energy is what is referred to as embodied energy, and the carbon emissions associated with that embodied carbon. And we've been totally ignoring that, right? So the way that we've solved performance problems focused on new buildings and operational carbon has been to do things like double skin facades,
Right.
where we add significantly to the materiality of that facade system and totally ignore the embodied carbon consequences of doing that, not paid any attention to it at all, okay? And we've, this material selection. One of the things we talked about, one of the trends is an expansion of the material palette in the building scheme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't evaluate these materials in terms of their embodied carbon profile. We're starting to do that now, but we've just,
But
basically
barely.
completely ignored that in
Yeah.
the past.
Yeah, but barely.
Yeah.
But barely.
So this whole sustainability thing, it's like peeling back layers of the onion, and you wonder what's the next layer going to reveal. What are we not understanding about what we're doing now
Right.
that is contributing to the exacerbation of this problem? And I'm sure that there are still these things.
When did you get introduced to actually embodied carbon, and how did that happen?
Well, so I did the school thing.
Okay.
And
The school thing.
I'm now the poster child for lifelong learning.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, Doug Noble, professor at USC, I had gotten to know him well because I would frequently guest lecture. And every chance I had to get, had to do that, I would do it because I was, it was the best way to identify who were the brightest students coming out of the building science
It's
program
a great
there.
recruiting method.
And I was hiring those kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Sanjeev, who spoke at the
Oh,
thing
yeah.
yesterday,
really?
I hired him right out of
was
USC.
it Walter Moore?
The Walter P. Moore.
Walter
guy,
P. Moore, yeah.
He's great, and
Oh, yeah.
So he became one of our USI guys or ASI guys, and so I'm there, and at some point, Doug says, would you like to get more involved? And I said. And this was sort of, when the transition was starting to, the acquisition, buy, and close. And I had a little time for a while, and it sounded like a good idea. He said, would you like to get more involved in teaching? I said, yeah, sure. But I always thought I had to have a master's degree.
Right,
And I
yeah.
never did finish that. And he said, well, it's not with your career experience, you don't really need that, but why don't you do it? I could give you a scholarship, advanced standing, and you should do it. And I thought, well, if it's ever going to happen, I had the intention of doing it when I left.
Sure.
When I left to go to work, I was planning on working for 3 or 4 years and then going back to school. And I sort of thought, okay, so at this point, I'm like, almost 60 years old, and I'm like, it's now or never. So I did it, And it was, I looked at it as kind of a chore, but also an opportunity to turn around on these structural glass facade things as a body of work.
Totally.
And that became my thesis, and ultimately a book. The structural glass facades book was an adaptation of the thesis that I did there, and So, I did that, and I was just graduating from that. And Doug had been trying to get a PhD program started for years. And he got it going right there. So he managed somehow to talk me into being the first PhD student in the program.
In the building science program.
Yeah. And it's the thing about it was I didn't have any great expectations of this educational experience. I was looking at it as kind of a chore.
Sure.
And what happened was I turned 60 in the midst of the most profound educational experience of my life.
Wow.
And it was so invigorating. It just blew back these horizons that were encroaching that I wasn't even aware of were there.
Just cultural horizons.
Yeah. And it was just, and so actually talking me into it was probably not that difficult. But, the mistake I made was, what they told me was, I should have gone on with the structural glass facade exploration, but I wasn't into that. I wanted to do something new.
No, I get it.
And I really wanted to focus on the sustainability stuff.
For sure.
So that's what I did. In my thesis, my PhD hypothesis challenged the sustainability of contemporary curtain wall systems. So that was the focus of the study. And at that point, I thought I really had my head around what sustainability was.
Okay.
And I quickly discovered that I didn't have a clue. But it gave me the opportunity to do this deep dive into sustainability. And it was...
that's the danger of education.
Oh,
though.
man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's the danger of education of like the ignorance is bliss until you actually like dive in and be vulnerable. But I got to learn something.
Yeah.
Wow. What a profound experience.
It took me another 8 years, to finish the PhD, to finish the coursework was, I knocked that out, fairly quickly. But
Sure.
the dissertation part of it, where you have to finish the research and wrap that into a dissertation, is hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, I have to say that there's a tremendous amount of credit to be given to somebody who goes into that with a very open mind and an ability to want to move forward, because a lot of people when they're at that point in their career and have done the things and seen the things and set standards to a certain degree of the things, they don't think, I'm going to go back and learn more about this segment. They're like, I know all the things. I should be the one teaching any class ever, right? And then they sit up on this mountaintop and they look down. But to go back in, I mean, first of all, what a stress level probably for that professor. He's like, it's like the guy who goes back after 10 years of being a surgeon and goes back to learn something about being a general practitioner doctor. You've got a lot of knowledge that you're carrying with you no matter what. So you're going to look at it from a vantage point that is so pure in a certain way. But what a treat to get through and see it through. And now to be able to say that you're not only talking the talk, but you've done it through getting a PhD. That wasn't a slam dunk by any stretch. Wow, that's just an incredible path to take and an honorable way to sort of push through.
Yeah, I mean that degree. That at this point, it's certainly not about the degree, right? The degree doesn't really do anything for me, but that experience, that journey was, I don't know. There's, what is there that's greater than learning? I mean, it's. The toughest part of it was I worked the whole time. I mean, a
perfect tomato is better than
yeah,
right.
Well, we can get back to that.
Yeah, we can, right? Yeah.
Not to get back to it, but at the same time, a lot of people know and a lot of people don't. You are a vegan. Well, or at least you eat a plant-based diet.
I'm beyond vegan.
You're beyond vegan.
Yeah.
And you've been that for quite a while?
4.5 years.
4.5 years?
Yeah.
And is it true that you traditionally travel with your own baked potato?
I do. I'm not comfortable if I don't have a baked potato in my pocket.
Because that's your constant backup, right?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I'll share on a personal level. I was vegan for 7 years prior to this year, and it was the best time of my life ever. It really was. And I am on my strides to get back to vegan because I jumped off almost in a very bad way. And I live in the land of meat now, and it's a very addictive mistress.
For sure.
It is a very addictive mistress. And so I'm on my journey back. What set you into it? Was it learning the world of sustainability? Was it a threat?
I would, I would like to say there's a whole lot of good reasons to do it.
Yes.
And I would like to say that, I was aware of all those reasons and just did it. But what motivated me to do it was my first cardiac adventure.
Okay, sure.
know?
That's a good
It's a good reason to do it.
That's a good.
That's a
way
pretty
to
loud
language
voice in your ear.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And I didn't have a heart attack or anything, but I had I ended up I was totally asymptomatic, but I knew I had a family predisposition, so I was doing an annual physical, and and I was eating a disciplined Mediterranean diet,
Sure,
doing what my cardiologist told me to do, exercising every day, all that stuff, and ended up with an angiogram and a stent and complications, and a blocked artery and all this kind of stuff, And at my follow-up visit, I said, "What's the deal? I've been doing everything you guys tell me to do." Yeah. And he goes, "Genetics." Sure. And I said, "So are you telling me there's nothing I can do about this?" And he said exactly this. He said, "Well, there's some scientific evidence that a whole food plant-based diet can prevent and even reverse heart disease, but I don't feel like I could do that." Or he said, "I couldn't do that, so I don't feel like I could recommend it to my patients."
Oh, geez.
And I said, "Wait a minute."
Well, if a doctor can't take a pill because of a gag reflex, you know what I mean? Like, if you can't take that is the most obscure advice I've heard, or a reason for not wanting to prescribe that. But hey, whatever. You're there now.
So I didn't know what that was, Sure. But I when I walked out of the door of that place, I was on that diet, And so I did the research, figured out what it was, called the cardiologist at the Cleveland Heart Clinic that wrote the book. This guy Estelson, brilliant guy, and it's like how to prevent and reverse heart disease, right?
Yeah.
And I said, "I want you to be my cardiologist," and he's like, I don't practice anymore, but I do these workshops. You should come out. And so my wife and I got a plane, flew to Cleveland and did the workshop. It's him and his wife. I mean, this is lifestyle change, right?
100%.
So
100%.
It's about learning not just what to eat, but where to find it, how to cook it, all of that kind of stuff. This is another journey, And, one of the things that when I was doing the research, one of the things that I came across was that 93% of people, when faced with a life-threatening illness that could be improved or cured through lifestyle change, can't do it. And I said at that point, I said, I'm not going to be one of these people. So
right.
I went after it hard, and I've been on it for 4.5 years, and I have to say at this point that I'm extremely happy to be where I am, and I have no desire to go back to where I was. But the difference is radical.
It's incredible.
The difference in what I'm eating.
Yeah.
What astonishes me is that I'm eating a lot of stuff, a great deal of stuff that they were telling me I couldn't eat, and I'm totally enjoying it. Like bread and baked potatoes, and it's basically a starch diet. That's what they tell you.
It is tremendously starch heavy.
Yeah.
But in the right way, in the right starches and the right fats, and so I think that there's a lot of not collaboration, but it ties directly into what we're talking about in the sustainability of buildings. In the same fashion, it's like the United States is about to have a cardiac adventure, right?
Yeah.
And in the ways of this carbon issue that's happening, and the continuous burning of all these fossil fuels and the production of everything that's happening with the buildings, and they need to be put on notice.
Yeah.
That it's time for a change. And we can't be the doctor that says we wouldn't recommend it because it'd be tough, right?
Yeah.
We need to be the doctor who goes, you're going to do this or you're going to die.
Yeah.
And it has to be that cut and dry to a certain degree. And it's grim and it's dark and it's ugly, but it's a reality.
I like the metaphor. It's like if you look at change comes about sort of in two basic ways. One is you can inspire change.
Sure.
Change is inspired through leadership, and we have a real void of that, in the world today. The other way that change happens is through pressure.
Yeah.
Things have to get really bad before they change. The problem with climate change is that you got a long response time. I mean, all this time that it's not feeling that bad, we're building, we're putting more and more trouble in the bank for us in the future.
It's like frogs in the boiling pot,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But what a great time to eat a plant-based diet, because 5-10 years ago, it was a different world for the plant-based diet humans. Yeah. It was
from an accessibility, what's available standpoint.
In the world of travel, it's still tough. I had to travel to a lot of cities, and it was borderline impossible. That's why you have the potato in your pocket.
Well, it's restaurants are the hard part, right?
Man, I've been to so many restaurants where you can't even get a salad.
Yeah.
Because everything is just drenched or covered in something. I've been to plenty of work events where I've literally had a bowl of spinach leaf.
Yeah.
Because with some lemon or something.
That's great.
That was phenomenal.
That's great.
But that was literally the only thing they could offer
The
on
only
a
problem
40-page
is
menu.
Without the starch, it doesn't get you very far down the road.
Not
the
very far.
greens are great.
You're going to burn through that before dinner's done.
Yeah.
But in Seattle specifically, Seattle has embraced it and pushed it to the top, where there are several restaurants. We ate at the one that it was sort of a mixed fare, but they had the vegan mac and cheese, and they had a couple of other great offers. And then just around the corner from that, there's a restaurant called Plum, which is hands down one of the best vegan restaurants, I'll say, on the planet.
The problem I have is I go into a vegan restaurant and there's nothing on the menu I can order. I'm not really vegan. I'm whole food plant-based. And the big thing is no oil.
No oil.
Because they've definitively, scientifically linked oil to the damage to the cells that line the arteries. And this is a huge part of the problem. And the cardiologist at the Cleveland Heart Clinic told me, you got to tell the guys at the restaurant when you go there that, you're allergic to oil,
right.
a drop, not even a drop of oil, because they don't get it. People are like, well, certainly olive oil.
I'm sure he'll
okay.
be fine. He'll be fine.
Yeah, right.
So,
No,
but
yeah,
it's and I couldn't holistically, without getting clubbed across the face or the neck area. I would say that I was vegan, and then I would get punched in the face by a vegan who said, well, then why do you eat honey?
Yeah.
Or why do you have a leather belt on? Or why?
Yeah.
So I get it, and that's that. I was more of a whole foods plant-based diet, and it was just magical. And it also pushed me to explore so many things and so many. Like I learned to be. I was intoxicated with mushrooms.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like I always thought there was a mushroom.
Oh yeah.
There was either a white or a brown. That was my knowledge pretty much of mushroom.
Yeah, doing this diet has opened up a universe of taste to me.
Yeah. It was a couple of years ago you bought me that mushroom book.
Yeah.
Oh man. Mushrooms are just magical. And
yeah.
they'll dance
Some of them
for you.
are quite literally magical.
They are super magical. Yeah. Toss a couple of those in the pot roast. You're good to go.
Well, somebody went to San Francisco in 1969, so I wonder what happened over there.
Yes, indeed.
Nothing.
It's a good time to be alive. What can I say?
Everything happened. Everything happened. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Facade Tectonics. Let's wrap into the how people can be part of the change and how they can be part of the process of changing the world. We talked to Helen Sanders. You sort of threw up the volley of let's change the world, and she kind of knocked it back down with like right now and
let's change the world faster. She said.
Faster. Yeah.
Right. And so we want to do as much as we can to help push that out, to promote that. So when people hear this and they're inspired and they want to go right then and figure it out. Because we're living in a 5-second, world of
on demand.
If you don't catch me right now, well, I can put it on my phone. What are some of the networks or some of the things that they can start to do and be part of?
You mean with the Institute?
Yeah,
with the Institute specifically.
Where do they reach out to? Where do they go to? FacadeTectonics.org, right?
Yep. That's the website where, we have a rather primitive website up now, but we're in August. We're rolling out a new, more robust website. The intention there is to make that a deep resource for the AEC community with respect to building skin stuff, and that, of course, will build over time. The institute is a member-based institute, so at a very basic level, join up. I think what we're doing with the institute, I think, is interesting at a number of levels. But at a very basic level, if you are a person that gets it, and especially a person that gets it and understands the role that the building skin plays in architecture and the built environment,
right.
And you are somebody that wants to make a difference and do something about this, and maybe has been feeling a little impotent about doing that, we're a platform, for wading into this thing and getting involved. And we've been, like I said, we started in 2007. We just started taking members in 2015. We incorporated, I think, in 2017. But we are still very much in startup mode.
Sure.
So if you want to be involved at the
ground
floor level and get in and start swinging and make things happen, we're wide open for that stuff. There's all kinds of things to do. We have the big parts of our mission are education and research. So we have an education committee in place, and this is not just academic research or academic education. This is this is young professionals education. I think there's a big opportunity there. There's education in the trades. A lot of layers of the education onion, and then research. And to the extent that we can pull it off, independent research.
Okay.
But we're also a very collaborative entity, and we're intent on catalyzing research with entities in the AEC industry that we can get to, sort of, come on, let's get with it, people. We've been really bad in our industry at research and development and funding research and development initiatives.
Correct.
Let's get some dollars together. Let's put them together. Let's pool them so that we can kick the can further down the road. There's all kinds of stuff. So what we're doing, what we're involved with right now, our research committee, which is probably 20, 25 strong, is involved in putting together a white paper that identifies what we believe are the leading opportunities to focus those research efforts on, right? Education committee is doing the same thing. We have a special advisory council that advises the board of directors. I mean, our board of directors, you can see, also the council you can see on the website. Board of directors, an amazing group of thought leaders in the industry.
Like a literal who's who of some of the strongest men and women in the industry.
Yeah.
Just
The
heavy
vanguards of where they are in each sector,
hitters.
Yeah.
Heavy hitters for sure.
Our board meetings are unbelievable.
I refuse to
imagine.
believe that they are anything but that.
Oh God, they're awesome! I tell you, it's just a joy to participate in that. But
That's impressive.
Yeah. So in the special advisory council, we have 26 people in that right now. That is sort of a gateway into the institute and involvement in other committees. We have a marketing committee. We do the Skins newsletter. There's all kinds of areas where we need help. Katie and I do the Skins newsletter, and we're, for a while we were doing an issue every month, and it just got to be, with all the other stuff that was going on, it got to be too much.
Yeah.
But there should be an issue every month, and we want to do an issue every month. But we need support. We need people,
to submit and to write
and write articles. I mean, I can't write everything, and I don't want to write everything that goes in there.
Well, guys, if you're listeing to this now, this is an invitation for you guys to participate and actually get introduced to, why do I have to submit the guest articles and actually have participation in it, and then look into Facade Tectonics. You guys want those voices out there? This is a platform for you guys to do it. So please.
And there's value in it. It goes out to a database of 16,000 people, which is not a whole lot in the building community. But these are all facade focused guys.
That's my point.
There
awesome. Yeah. Just how potent that community is.
You're not talking about 16,000 people who Kylie Jenner's Instagram feed, right? That's not the key demographic that's going to drive the change in the global market.
Right.
These are 16. You could say 1,600, and that would mean a lot because these are very potent, very very.
Just the innovators of the entire. The entire facade community that actually take those goals exactly and as kind of tattoos on their heart a little bit. You know what I mean? These are actually real understandings of 2030, 2040, 2050 and the challenges that exist there. But they understand that facade is where it starts. It's not where it ends.
Yeah.
No, and we're also seeing a key demographic, which is because of the 2008, 2009, just punch in the face to the commercial construction world that just sort of happened in terms of, terrible economy and recession moments and things after 2007. There's a massive gap in the middle earth part of our industry from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah.
You've got a bunch of great leaders who are, looking to retire out, very, very shortly.
Yeah.
And then you have a bunch of people who are just getting started. And then you have people who are almost started. And the people that are almost started are some of the most driven and hungry and grassroots activist, and we're
Purposeful.
taking care of.
Yeah.
They understand that this has got to happen. It's got to happen now, but they're still back here.
Yeah.
So they need the promotion. There needs to be this bridge that continues to happen in getting those two worlds together, because there is a huge section missing from the middle.
Yeah, and that bridging term is really central to what we're talking about in many dimensions. Not just bridging that generational thing, but also the institute is a response to the fragmentation in the AECO industry, right? And this is notorious, this fragmentation. What we're trying to do with the work of the institute is bridge those fragments, right? So that you've got academia talking to the practitioners. You've got the preservationists talking to the guys that are doing new facade design.
Right.
All of these kind of feedback loops
yeah.
that have been compromised by this fragmentation, we can start to rebuild those.
Awesome.
This has been great, man.
Geez, this has been incredible. This has been an unbelievable journey through what is an unbelievable journey. I mean, what an incredible. I have to ask one question before we jump into the Edify top 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to ask one question. One of my favorite enclosed products, I'll say. I don't know if you worked on it. I don't know if it was a studio part. You can either say real quickly, like, not me, move on, or let me know. Was the New York Times facade.
The New York Times building.
The New York Times building that had that metal facade that had the sort of articulating metal structure out in front. It was the facade that read the New York Times. It was like the metal rain screen that sat up
Not
front.
an enclosed project.
It wasn't an enclosed.
No, piano. Piano's the architect. It wasn't an enclosed job. It's a cool job though.
It was one of my
LB&L was deeply involved in that project. They did. There is a beautiful, very deep daylighting and glare study on that project that LB&L did. That is a public resource available on their website.
Really?
Yeah, and it's they did a mock-up.
Let's put the
I'll
link
put it
up
up
on
there,
that one.
yeah,
That's,
for
that
sure.
was really great.
One of the problems that we have is post-occupancy evaluation pointing to some of these advanced designs and whether they were successful or not, and many of them were not.
Right.
This is a very successful project. There's post-occupancy data to validate it. It's got the automated blinds and all that kind of stuff. They built a full-scale mock-up of this thing and tested it for a year before they finalized the design on that facade.
Oh my gosh.
It's an awesome documentation of a very successful project.
Well, then I'll just cut out the part where I said enclosed. The beauty and magic of editing.
No, that's great, man. And we really appreciate you being here, Mick. This has been actually really wonderful for us to kind of dive into a little bit of your backstory and find out how that's kind of perpetuated through the career and where sustainability and kind of woke up for you along the way. We consider you a deep innovator within the community, and I know that a lot of the glass and facade people do that are here listening to this, and so we just encourage the people listening to reach out and to participate with Facade Tectonics, and also if you can, they have a strong event calendar, so please just make sure you, as you look into this, it's nationwide. It's not just in one city or two cities across the nation. Facade Tectonics actually comes and participates in these markets, and that's what I love about it. Is they even the past 24 hours I was telling people about it, or I was doing a lot of tweeting and a lot of Instagram stories and those things, and even on LinkedIn as I gone through, and that actually kind of bleeds into my Edify top 2. Is like one of the things is that you said. Oh man, it was a question. It was just like, can we actually afford sustainability? Got brought up. So this is my first one. I thought it was just such a key component to the entire thing. Is you said, someone said, can we afford sustainability? And your response was, what does it mean if we can't?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, come on, let's just
For us, that was
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It tipped me over.
But that's I mean that was a question at one of the forums.
Yeah.
And I think it's a question that doesn't get asked much, but it's in everybody's mind. There's a lot of people that are thinking, how can we afford this? There is no question.
I'll tell you right now that
that
everybody thinks that. That is one of those automatic stops of like, Yeah, you talk about green, you talk about sustainability, talk about lead points. What other program do we got to participate in just so someone can actually kind of record something, right? And but I think the ignorance of that state of that type of attitude understanding is that they're not. That question is, can we afford sustainability? For you to just respond with a question back, not to answer their question. No. Allow them to actually come to that like heart experience that you've actually done within your career path. What does it mean if we can't afford it?
What an impact.
Yeah.
So anyway, Andrew Herring of NGA actually got back. He's the vice president of business development. He goes, simple question. The answer is multifaceted, to say the least. Value engineering is the go-to answer too many times, right? It's just too many times. Project players need to think about long-term value, investment, ROI for the tenants. Mick is always a wealth of knowledge and an incredible perspective he always brings to the table. So well stated, Andrew. Like, you know what I mean? I thought that was just a kind of like that. It tipped me over when
it's a huge pushover, and I think that's an incredible quote back. But I want to point on the value engineering part of it, because I love value engineering when it's time to value engineer.
Yeah.
When you've gone six floors into the ground and you realize that all of your water infiltration that's happening on site has caused you to creep up in costs, right? When all of your underground or when those things start to creep up, you get in, you get your hands dirty, and you start to figure out, okay, how are we gonna save some money on this building because we spent way too much trying to mitigate all that water infiltration. I don't like value engineering because somebody got in the way of the good idea being pushed the whole way through. Yeah. Like when it's conceptualized in the beginning and it's part of the structure the entire time, and it's part of the concept and it's part of the envelope and the delivery, and then it gets severed somewhere along the line because there was not enough information shared to the guy who's putting it in and dealing with the system, that's not value engineering. That's fixing a problem that was created way late in the game. And I not to poo-poo all over that, but that's part of the problem is this should be the concept that goes into the forefront of every building and gets carried all the way through. And they got to involve that glazer, that subcontractor, that metal panel person, whoever's doing the facade. They've got to be there in some capacity.
I mean, we have a real problem with nomenclature and term definition in our industry. You know, we already talked about design assist.
Is it design assist or is it design build?
Yeah, right. Well,
which one is it?
Either or, both. You know, both of them. If there's no convergence on the definition of these terms, so we run around talking about sustainability, and every one of us has a different idea of what that is in our head. It's like the Tower of Babel. We're not communicating.
Right. No, they're all speaking different languages. Yeah. That's for 100%.
No, if I asked somebody what sustainability meant to them, it would be like not fishing all the time, right? You got to pause and you got to wait and let the fish sort of, repopulate, and that's sustainable to them. Or, to build a town that you can work in and live in. Yeah. That's sustainable.
Or good tomatoes out of your backyard.
Or good tomatoes that actually taste like a effing tomato.
We need to grab a good bruschetta.
Oh,
that's what we need to do. Good. With that same bottle of wine that
dirty heirloom tomato.
Right? That'd be amazing.
Forget that. But anyway, get the glazers. Get the glazers in earlier.
So that was mine.
Get the subs in early.
I figured I'd do just a quote and then a response back from Andrew. But, go ahead, man.
Mine are super philosophical and philanthropic and incredible. My first one's about whiskey.
Deal.
That I drink.
Let's do it. Right.
So I love whiskey. Whiskey's kind of my, I don't know, my vice, my go-to.
There's no vice in it. That's for sure.
I love a bourbon.
It's your milk.
I got to. Mama needs a little milk. So I tried. I was given a bottle of Heaven's Door, and I hadn't heard of it before. Heaven's Door is done by. Why did I just blank on his name? Knocking on Heaven's Door, Bob.
Knocking on Heaven's Door like
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan. I couldn't get to Dylan.
I couldn't believe you couldn't get that one.
I was like, I had the Dylan was sitting right there, and I couldn't grab it. So Bob Dylan.
Okay.
I didn't know this about him, so I looked it up. Bob Dylan is a welder. He has a huge metal shop, and he is an artistic welder. He builds like these statement pieces and these decorative statue pieces and these arbors, all built out of like gears and chains and metal leftovers to a certain degree.
Right.
And first of all, I thought that was fascinating, just to see that these guys are artistic and creative on so many levels all the time. You can't shut off the artistic and guys like Bob Dylan, right? And then he's like, I want to make whiskey too. So he did it, and it's called Heaven's Door, and each bottle looks a little bit different, and it has like decorative elements of his work on the bottles themselves. And it's not only just a good-looking bottle, and Bob Dylan's a cool dude.
Give us a little bit of that music on the override here when you actually do it.
I'm not going to do it. It's going to be silent. It's going to be absolutely silent.
Just wanted to listen to a little Bob Dylan in the background as you're
not going to do
it. All right, fine.
Not going to do it at all. But it was actually very good. It was actually very good whiskey. Because a lot of times celebrities, they get caught up in something and they put out Dave Matthews, who I like. Dave Matthews' music, his drummer is one of the best drummers ever. Carter, if you're listening, you're not, but that's fine. But Dave Matthews put, and don't sue me, he put some of the worst wine. He did I think it was called Screaming Tree, and I think the tree was screaming because the wine was so gross. Dreaming Tree. It was Dreaming Tree wine. Oh my God,
Nightmare.
so gross.
It was Screaming Tree to you.
It was Screaming Tree to me. It was Bleeding Tree. So a lot of times celebrities get caught up in these things, and it was actually very, very good bourbon.
Yeah, so Keith Boswell, SOM.
Yeah. He
So-
worked heavily on the airport project here
So
at Seattle Terminal.
get him down to the studio, buy a good bottle of that whiskey. He's a Southern boy. He likes that
That's
whiskey.
right.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
good note.
That's
Keith is actually a board member, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
But that's the key to his heart, man. I mean,
we got to get him on the podcast. That'd be a fun one.
Yeah,
And
he's
then-
great.
And then speaking of the podcast and speaking of, I was so overwhelmingly excited about the Embodied Carbon Network that Kate Simonin, who's UW professor.
The Carbon Leadership Forum
Carbon
and the
Leadership
Embodied
Forum,
Carbon
yeah.
Network is part of the Carbon Leadership Forum. Yeah.
The Carbon Leadership Forum, I was absolutely blown away at how important and how loud that needs to get sort of shouted out of the rooftops. So I was just incredibly motivated by everything that she was putting together and everything I've continued to research since then, because she pushes it out in such a way that it makes it very... she puts it on these very chewable bites of information. It's not just like fact, and then you got to figure out how to consume it. She gets it. She knows what the root pieces are, and she's just overwhelmingly amazing.
She's got that leadership quality.
She has
she
it.
is inspirational. Yeah.
And you could tell her and Christopher Meek. You could tell they spend so much time in front of a classroom and so much time in and around a podium, because they knew how to handle it.
And they were at home at that
100%.
thing. I just loved listening to them, and I loved Christopher actually moderating, and then Kate actually just kind of like, and I get to ask my questions, like how excited she was to
and great
just
questions.
do it. I mean, just so great. It really was.
Incredible overall. So those are my top two. For sure.
So anything weird, interesting, hobby level that you want to that you've been
Top
kind
two.
of interested? Two things.
I just not long ago tailed out of this. I'm still in recovery, actually, from the dissertation thing. I mean, I had to put some serious stuff on hold. Over a 10-year period to do that. It's not without sacrifice. Because I was working full time all the time. But like my keyboard, my guitar, cooking, my garden. So now I'm up to my elbows in building out raised beds in the garden.
I like it.
I'm starting to play music again. I'm baking bread, writing. It's like a whole new life.
Discovery.
It's wonderful.
I can only imagine.
And the bread baking thing is like amazing.
When you have time here, next time, there's a little place about an hour north called Edison, Washington, just right on one of those little sloughs, those oyster sloughs on the Puget Sound, and it's one of those kind of sleepy, forgotten one-road deals. And they have the bread farm there, and it's just, oh my gosh, everything, like, so all their own yeast, all their own starters, everything that's they're actually doing, and they actually give the starter out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. On Thursdays, it's one of the best little bakery places, and they just pump out loaf after loaf. It's just, and you go in there, it has like that essence of like old school bakery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's pretty awesome little place. So
Intoxicating.
Yeah, it is.
It's amazing what a what a fantastic challenge making a good loaf of bread.
Oh,
is.
right.
It's just,
Like
and
the
it's
spring-
so rewarding when you hit it. You know.
It's
The crunch
100%
of- the
science.
crunch. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
It is the absolute of science. It is you go a fraction of something too much or too less
Right.
or not at the right time. It is. That's why I can't bake bread.
I mean, the other, like Bob Dylan, you know, that kind of thing too is how rewarding is that to do your own whiskey? I've got a pomegranate tree in the backyard, and I want to make pomegranate brandy. I want to build a still, and make pomegranate brandy.
That sounds phenomenal.
I am excited.
It is a
about
whole
doing
new
that.
world for you, isn't it? This is great, man. This is awesome.
Oh, and pomegranate.
Okay.
It's phenomenal.
So let's do a follow-up episode with us having a little pomegranate
Yeah,
brandy
excellent.
from Mixed Garden.
100%.
like it.
On site. On site.
No,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Huge.
It's my pleasure, guys. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much. I want you to make sure you reach out to Mick at Facade Tectonics. Any other special places that actually get a hold of you, Mick, besides Facade Tectonics, or email, or LinkedIn?
My email is mpatterson@facadetectonics.org. You know, that's
the best
that's
place.
the main line to get a hold of me.
Excellent.
I have a LinkedIn profile up there. You know, I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably easy to find. I don't think there's a lot of Mick Pattersons. It's
No.
MIC Patterson. So
Gotcha.
It's pretty limited stock.
No, and you guys reach out to us on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We would be glad to actually link this episode into you guys, and be sure to share your comments back and forth with your colleagues in the office space, you know, at the gym, whatever it works. This is a pretty incredible episode.
Let's change the world right now.
Let's do it. Let's do it
do it right
faster,
now.
right?
Faster.
So, anyways, thanks so much, guys, for joining the Edify Studios podcast. Hope you guys just tune in, listen, subscribe. Make sure you ding that bells for notifications, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Edify Studios podcast with hosts Brad Glauser and Brad Walker. To learn more about Edify Studios, visit www.edify-studios.com. That's www.edify-studios.com.